So, just his budget, or?
Just the sheriff's budget.
Okay, that's what I figured, but I saw it. Well, good morning to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Tuesday, July 26th Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. And if we'll stand at this time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So it's nice to see some visitors today. We welcome all of you. At this point, we'd like to see if there are any adjustments to today's agenda.
Madam Chair, I'd like to request that, I know we're talking about the first look at the budget, general fund budget, late in the meeting, but we've got Sheriff Eliason here, and I would like to, in respect of his time, I would like to talk about the sheriff's budget after the consent agenda.
All right. We'll move that up then. Any other adjustments or changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. We have a motion and support. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. At this point, we have our public comment period and opportunity for citizens to appear before the county board. Is there anyone today that would like to make a public comment? Anyone who would like to make a public comment? And Administrator Yorkie, do you have any emailed comments?
I have not received any, Madam Chair.
All right. Given that, we'll move on to our consent agenda items. Are there any items a commissioner would like to pull? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yes, I'd like to pull item D, safe routes to school, and maybe move that down to the discussion about the rest of the safe routes to
I
school.
anticipated that. All right. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Commissioner Hawkins. Are there any other changes or adjustments to our consent agenda? Right. Hearing or seeing none, is there a motion to approve as amended?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Svallesen. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support for our consent agenda. Any further discussion or changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. At this point, we will move on to the Sheriff's Department budget.
Yeah, and I just, again, I just wanted to give the sheriff an opportunity to talk about one of the key changes in his budget, which is a new technology line item. And Sheriff, if you'd like to just maybe go over the thinking behind that and kind of what that would cover.
Sure, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I guess I'll just preface this by saying that the public safety industry has painted themselves into a corner with technology right now. And our dependence on technology is such that if it goes down, we're kind of dead in the water. And we have so much now, just in the last probably 10 years between, and I have a bit of a list here. We have our tasers, our WatchGuard is our in-squad camera system. The camera equipment, the radio, remote transmitters and software for video storage, cell phones, the databases used by dispatch and the interfaces that are needed by dispatch for connectivity with other PSAPs, armor radios, our records management system, X-ray machine for the courthouse, the LEC camera system, 911 phone system, the MDCs in our squads. When you take all of that I said armor radios. When you take all of that, excuse me, and bundle it into one, you have a whole lot of technology and a whole lot of support, not just with our maintenance fees and upgrade fees and that, but with our MIS folks here at the county, that it lends itself to this for lack of a better word, this monster that we have right now. And if any part of it goes down, we're in quite a difficult situation. So typically in the past, when systems have gone down and we need them replaced, I would come to the board and we would find a way, to take money from the general fund to replace these systems. What I would like to do moving forward is take the increase that I had in my budget for 2023, which was $120,000, and keep putting $120,000 into an account to start saving up for these replacements. Because if for example, if our records management system went down tomorrow, we'd be looking at $150,000 to $200,000 to replace that. Replacing armor radios every 5 years is $150,000. When you start adding all of those up, it adds up very fast into a pretty significant number. So that's why I put that in my budget, and I'll take any questions that you all have.
Any questions for Sheriff Eliason? Commissioner Hawkins?
So I did notice that the MDCs were maybe moved over to MIS, which makes sense to me. So that's not part of your
Correct.
amount. And armor radios, didn't we already have a line item for replacing armor radios in another?
We used some leftover funds from the budget last year to replace some of the armor radios for search and rescue.
Okay, so we didn't have a line item?
No, we did
On a
not.
regular basis for
No,
that? Okay,
no.
I just wanted to make sure my notes were right.
Yeah, and I think, I really applaud the sheriff for putting this in. I do think we need to be forward-thinking and prepared for, equipment failures, and, technology ages quickly. And so having something in the budget where we've got a standing fund that we can use to cover these kinds of expenses, I think is really a great idea.
I would agree, and I think, it's a planned savings account, if you will, and it's a planned savings account for public safety, and there's nothing more critical, nothing more important. So I thank you for doing that type of planful evaluation of your budget. Other questions or comments?
And it's really similar to MIS department. It's just, there's so much in the sheriff end, it makes sense to split it out and show it. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your explanation and your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sheriff.
Thanks. All right, although our public hearing is next on our agenda, it is not 9 a.m., so we're going to move on to item number 5, PHHS. And Grace Kronager is here with us this morning to talk about Healthy Kids Minnesota Joint Powers Agreement. Good morning, Grace.
Good morning. So the Healthy Kids Minnesota Joint Powers Agreement comes from the Minnesota Department of Health reaching out to us here in Cook County and asking us to be part of the Healthy Kids Minnesota project. It's a biomonitoring project that screens for environmental toxins in preschool-aged children, so those 3 to 6 years old. And it incorporates a urine sample into the preschool screen to run it for these environmental toxins. So that's the part that they're looking for us to play. They have a larger statewide effort where they're rotating regions every year with the intent of continuing to monitor for environmental toxins in a younger population that's more susceptible to the negative effects of environmental toxins over time to see if things are changing. And if they do come up with participants that does have an elevated level of one of the toxins that they're monitoring for, they're connected to a physician that works with the Department of Health and given follow-up through the states. So the Joint Powers Agreement is to essentially come up with a fee-for-service contract to pay for supply costs and staff time that it would take for PHHS to help administer the project for the 6 to 9 months that we would be working with the Department of Health and also the school district, as they're the ones who administer the preschool screens, to participate in this project. So it's an opt-in project for parents. We would give them information about the project, what it would entail, what the follow-up would be for their children and for them as parents, and then they would have the option to participate in this project. So that is the Joint Powers Agreement, and I'm happy to take questions on the project overall or the agreement itself.
All right, thank you, Grace. Questions, Grace? Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the preschool screening is done by the school. Is that correct?
It's a collaborative effort primarily between Sawtooth Mountain Clinic and ISD 166.
And so I was just wondering, so the number that you have for outreach and communications, that dollar amount, and then it said 2 hours per week for community events. I'm like, so is that public health staff, or is that, are we paying the school to
Nope,
staff it?
the budget entirely covers PHHS staff time. So the outreach would be, for example, working with local media outlets to put something in the paper or on the radio, just to let families know that this is something that's available to them. The events themselves are the actual screening dates at the school. So it would pay for PHHS staff to go to the school for the screening days to help with recruitment, specimen collection, then to do follow-up with the families who opt to participate.
Okay, so the public health staff is doing the collection during the screening.
Yes.
Okay, and I just was kind of shocked at that number for outreach cost of over $3,500, and I'm thinking, doesn't the school already have a list of kids 3 to 6 years old? We don't have that many, so that number shocked me.
It's primarily for staff time and then spots in paper and radio. So that's where the number comes from.
Thank you.
All right, great. Other questions? Commissioner Mills?
I don't have a question, and I really appreciate the program, but I also see this as an opportunity for us as, an organization and department, specifically in public health, to kind of piggyback and get more of a presence out in the community, and I think that's really important going forward when we talk about Public Health 3.0 and just ways to, strengthen our community. So really appreciate you bringing it forward.
Absolutely. Other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
All support.
Thank you, Commissioner Swallowson. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Grace. All right, we'll move on to item 6 with our Highway Department. And we see that we have Robbie Hass and Lisa Storley both here from the Highway Department this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
I was going to wait because I figured we won't be doing the presentation until after the public hearing.
That's fair enough. I'll go fast.
You're on your own.
On my own, yeah.
She's the one.
All right, you have support.
I have support now, thank you. Good. Well, if I have, yeah, board said we have support, I'm done. Good. No, let's see.
So that's unanimous on everything?
Yeah, see, that was easy. We're good at this. Let's see. First thing I think we have on here is a cooperative agreement with St. Louis County for striping. What is that? So we have stripes on our roads up here, obviously, and some roads don't have stripes. And in kind of, some of these meetings that I go to with my counterparts, some of the bigger counties, in particular, the biggest county in the state in this case, will hold presentations on, what they do for striping, because a lot of times they operate at a level that is just far above and beyond what we deal with every single day, and I don't envy them for that. But what was interesting is there was a presentation done a while ago where Lake County and St. Louis County already have this agreement, where St. Louis County administers the contract. They handle the paperwork, the bidding, and all that stuff. And what Lake County does is just kind of submits what they need. We need X amount of this type of stripe here, here, and here. Boom, done. And I guess it works out really well for Lake County and St. Louis County. It sounds like they get a pretty good price on it too in Lake County. And so I reached out to St. Louis County and said, hey, can we join? And they were more than happy to have us join. And so what this is just basically that agreement saying, the short of it, if you read through it, is they're responsible for their stuff, we're responsible for our stuff. We pay them, I think it's $500 to do all the contract administration, which is a deal by any standard, and we get our roads restriped. So in this case, the particular section of road we're going to do is the end of the Gunflint, or the end half, actually. So it's East Bearskin all the way to the end, is the plan. If you've been up there recently, there isn't any. So that's kind of what that is, and I would entertain any questions you guys have.
Any questions? Commissioner Mills?
Thank you for looking into this. It's a great idea. Did you ask Lake County at all about if there's any problems and how they resolve those, or, okay?
No, it seems, I think what it is like I said, we're still responsible for our stuff. And so the only thing is this contract just gets administered in
Yep.
St. Louis County. So they'll handle, like how we do bid openings and stuff like that.
Yep.
Same thing, just down there. And they, yeah.
So I'm just thinking, as far as line of communication, you don't have to
Oh.
go through St. Louis County. You'll be working
Oh,
with the
yeah.
contractor
We'll be
directly.
Directly here, yeah.
Okay.
So
That was
it'll
my
still
only
be
concern.
treated like we'll still have, like our guys out in the field here,
Yeah.
making sure, the lines are where they are, or we're getting, what we wanted.
What we need when we need it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
The primary benefit, Commissioner, is economy of scale.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Precisely. Commissioner Hawkins?
So St. Louis County hires the contractor then?
Correct.
It doesn't come back to us to say, yes, we approve that?
No, and it's the low bid process. And so it's the same process we do here. It'd be no different than if we did it here, but, kind of like what Lisa was saying, now you have 3 counties worth of striping, which is a much larger quantity. Typically, that's where you think of the Costco effect, right? You get a better deal on your giant jug of mail than you do whatever. But it's the same
Not
idea.
always,
Yeah.
not always, but still.
It's the same idea, is that. So it's just low bid at that point. There's still your paperwork to fill out. And as long as you do that, that's kind of the end of the conversation right there.
Who have we hired in the past to do this striping work?
Good question. We haven't done it since I've been here. That's not that long, but do you happen to know?
In the past, we've used AAA striping, and because of the cost of mobilization up here, historically, what we have tried to do is tag it onto a state aid construction project where they're coming in as a subcontractor to stripe at the end of one of our big construction projects, and then we'll tack a little bit on if we can afford it on another road, which does have its limitations, of course.
Okay. I was just wondering if it was somebody local and we were,
No.
okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to share that at the Poplar Lake Association meeting this past weekend, I did mention that this was coming up today on our agenda, and people were very thrilled. So there's a great interest in having this done by the community. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One other thought that came to mind is just, and this is an aside, but maybe a future, is just the needs of the city. I believe the city has some equipment, but I didn't know if it's worthwhile talking with them about, and I know it's not the city per se, but any county roads within the city, or I don't know if there's potential there, but.
Yeah, I know they have, because I think they work on, I'd have to talk to them to see what they can handle. Because
Right.
what we're talking about is quite a bit. Like I said, East Bearskin to the end.
Right.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And
it's a different, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, no, that's a good point, though. It would be interesting to at least know, because I know they can do, like crosswalk repainting and stuff, which is obviously much smaller. But, yeah, no, it's a good point.
Just something to think
And
about.
what I understand from that piece of equipment, because at the Council of Aging, they were talking about striping in their parking lots, that is used for very small projects
Sure,
throughout the city, so,
fair enough.
all right. Other questions or comments? All right. Well, if not, I would entertain a motion.
So move, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Mills. We have a motion. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Awesome.
All right.
Let's see, we have a couple of bid awards, but then that resolution
Right, we
too,
want to do
so-
the resolution
You want to
first.
start there? Okay.
Please.
So do you, I don't know if there's a question, or should I like explain it a little bit, or what would you like?
My question,
Sure.
I know we discussed this at our Highway Advisory Committee meeting also, but this morning while I'm getting ready, I thought, has this gone before the city council? Did they also have to have a resolution supporting this because it does cross
Yes,
their road?
and we did. Yes.
Okay, so that part has been taken care of.
Absolutely.
They've approved the plan, and nobody's going to come back later and say, we don't want it to cross that unvacated road
Sure.
on.
Nope,
just
I went
want
to,
clarify.
what city? I went to a city council meeting, oh, it was a while ago. I think it was before we even did the bid, before we even put it out for bid, and spoke about it there.
Okay.
So, yep, so the city is aware.
We have that on record, and
Yes.
nobody's going to come back and say, we're working against each other, even though it's costing us $40,000 more.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think I had to actually, now that I'm thinking about it again, the state, one of the requirements was a resolution from the city in support of this.
Okay.
So, yes.
Thank you. I
welcome.
just wanted to clear that
yeah.
up and
Nope.
make sure I had that written down right.
Totally.
All right, well, given that, is there a motion to adopt the resolution for Safe Routes to School Multi-Use Trail Resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Folleson. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You have your resolution.
Perfect, thank you. So then to the bid award. So we have two of them. The first one's the Safe Routes one. And this one, I was happy at where it came in. You know, I know we talk a lot about estimates and putting them together and why is it over, why is it under. And I guess, you know, and I've been keep trying to think of ways to explain engineering estimates and what they are, preliminary estimates. And, you know, even though this one, I think ours was 226,000 or something like that, and this came in at 264, I think. So it's 14% over. So in that regard, that's something that's nice. Generally, if we keep it under 15%, you're pretty good to go. And so, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into bidding as well. Obviously, the fuel stuff we're dealing with now is a part. And then two, to be honest, this was a pretty late bid. We bid this very, very late. And so I was happy that it only came in 14% over. I was very happy with the price there. And so I think everything's, you know, within the realm of the margin of error, if you will. Obviously, the more projects we do, the better, the more bullet points, you know, the more points we'll have to try and nail down some of these prices. And the more consistent we can get with our bid lettings, the more variables we remove from trying, you know, that hopefully just makes our estimates that much more accurate. You know, if we put everything out for bid in November, then that removes kind of the time frame aspect from these bids. Anyways, yeah, I think the grant we got was $206,000, 202. And so, yeah, so we'll have to come up with the additional 60, I can't do math, 60 some odd $1,000 right now. But that just comes out of our municipal state aid highway funds that we get from the state every year. We knew it was going to have to come from that. And so that's definitely okay with us, and I hope it's okay with you guys. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
All right, questions for Robbie? Commissioner Hawkins?
Can you remind me, is this cement pathway or is this pavement?
Asphalt.
It is, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Just one.
Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, and thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Abby. Again, this is a great project. I'm really excited, and but I was really curious what the bid was going to come in.
Me too.
Just, you know, because of everything, right? And so, yeah, it was more, and that's too bad. But as you say, it's not. Yeah, it's a reasonable amount, and
Yes.
I was afraid it was going to be much more. So.
I was very pessimistic going into it,
Yeah.
but I'm happy we are where we are.
Absolutely. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Storley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Robbie.
Morning.
Is this something you're using this year, or is it for the future?
This year.
This
So we're
year.
hoping, I have to go through paperwork with MnDOT, just to kind of finalize. That's why there's another, I've lost count of the number of resolutions and agreements we've had to do to try and get this thing going, but it seems like every stage of the game, there's something to it. But the plan is, and my hope is, we can get it done before school starts. So that's the plan. But I think paperwork will hold us up more than anything. But we'll see.
All right.
Okay, good.
Great. Other questions? Comments? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Swallison. Is there support?
Support?
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. We have a motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right.
So the next one is on the positive side of awarding bids. So this is a crack sealing project that we are going to do this year. Crack sealing is something you do. It's preventative maintenance that you do on new roads. Typically, you do it after year 1 and after year 2 of pavement. It allows the pavement to settle. You get those little cracks in the road. You just come through, clean them out, sealing them up. It's when you see the kind of the toilet paper on the road that's attached to the tar. That's what we're talking about. So where we're going to do it, though, is up on 17, where the new pavement is there, on the Gunflint from Trout Lake Road to Pine Mountain Road, and then South Shore Drive as well. That's kind of all the new pavement. And so what was neat with this is, you can see our estimate. We had, looked at kind of state average, like we've talked about. We look at state averages, we know where we are, we raise it up a little bit, and we go from there. And so it was nice to see, one, that we got a number of bids on this project, which was great, and two, that what we're hopefully going to award today was far less than what we thought it was going to be. And so, there's a lot that goes into it. You can do crack sealing by the pound of material, you can do it by length of crack, and you can do it like what we did, is by road station, so by mile of road. There was some research we had done that kind of showed if you do it by mile of road, it kind of keeps everybody honest. Then the contractors have to come look at the roads. You can't just sit there and gob it on to every single, crack to, increase the poundage or, find cracks, quote unquote, if you do it by the foot. So it was a nice way to do it. And what was interesting is hopefully what we award today will end up being, I think it was at or slightly below state average. So that was kind of a neat, I was happy to see that. So anyways, does anybody have any questions?
I think we're all just really happy about the price.
Fair enough.
All right. Is there a motion to award the contract?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Swallison. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, I know you're really excited to get into your budget, but we're going to ask you to pause for a minute because we have a public hearing in a couple of minutes.
Love it.
So we're going to make you wait.
Would you like us to move back?
That would be appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll have a short break prior to 9 o'clock when our public hearing begins.
It's a generous offer.
It's really lightweight.
I've got a subscription to this lake line, and it's got bathymetric maps of like all the maps, or lakes in Minnesota.
Do you have an anchor for your kayak?
Yep.
All right, well, everyone has returned, and so at this point, we're going to get ready for our public hearing. Thank you all for coming back. This morning at 9 a.m., we have our public hearing regarding the amendment to the property tax abatement for Sawbill Village. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Ann. How are you?
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the reason this is on the agenda is you approved a resolution for the Sawbill Village project abatement back in October.
Right.
And a couple of things have changed, significant things, since that time. At that time, the dates at which the abatement would start, I think that's the major change, was earlier. But since then, the project manager, Rob Dieter, has his estimates, timing estimates have changed. The dates have moved farther off. It wouldn't make sense to start an abatement before he's paying any property taxes, so, or very little property taxes. So this is to change it to the dates when the project is completed and the maximum amount of property tax can be abated. And then the second change that went along with that is the size of the project, the scale has changed a little bit in square footage. So this fixes that also. So that's what we're asking the public, if the public is here to comment, or anyone else. So.
All right, thank you so much. Rob?
Yeah, I think Auditor Powers' comments, our intent was to break
I'm
ground.
sorry, Rob, could you give your name and address?
Oh, I beg your
to
pardon.
start?
Rob Dieter, the developer of Sawbill Village, which is at 7226 West Highway 61 in Tofty.
Thank you.
Thank you. But the intent, as you know, is to break ground this fall. The stickler was supply chain. We couldn't have assured access to materials, and that would have caused some issues with over the winter. So we revised that schedule. We intend to break ground in May or June, whenever the frost lift would allow us to do that. The proposed completion date, it looks like those units, we're trying to move those up. Right now it's November of 2023. We've just finished the design phase of the architecture and are moving to schematic. And the intent is to submit July 31st for the conditional use permit meeting that would be held in September. The changes also have been submitted and reviewed to the IRRB and MHFA, and they've both approved the timeline. And I would just continue to highlight the need and the support of this abatement. This abatement is intended to support really the operational expenses of the apartments with the intent of keeping rents as low as possible. And that's how this is intended to be used. So grateful for the consideration and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Rob? All right. Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I guess I was kind of surprised that we didn't get anything in our package showing the new layout. Substantial decrease in square footage.
But not in the number of apartment units.
Okay, so are they still 6 two-bedroom apartments, ADA accessible, with garage and basement space?
Yes, Commissioner Hawkins, that is correct. I think the mistake on the initial report, if you'll recall, the footprint was 6,000 square feet per floor, and it also includes a basement of that same size. There was some initial, I think just some mistakes in terms of the reporting stating that there was 9,000 square feet of residential space and 9,000 square feet of retail space, when in fact, from all original communication was organized around 6,000 square feet allocated to the apartments and 6,000 square feet allocated to the retail spaces, and then a basement of 6,000 square feet where both the renters would have access to their storage unit, and then the retail spaces would have access for storage. So the footprint has not changed. All information specific to the 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartments, the size has not changed in its scope. All information communicated to you and to all stakeholders has been consistent. It was really more a misalignment of factoring in that 6,000 square foot of basement as residential and retail.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's helpful. Other questions? Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak regarding the amendment to the property tax abatement? If not, I would close the public hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. So now we'll jump back into our regular agenda and ask the Highway Department to come back up and talk a little bit.
Madam Chair, don't we have a public hearing for?
Yes, at 9:30.
Oh, at 9:30.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have our 2023 Highway Department draft budget, and we appreciate you putting together a presentation and providing explanation to us and the public as well.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for having us. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and all who are in attendance. As the Madam Chair said, this is our draft 2023 budget. Our 2023 draft budget totals just under $14.1 million. That is a decrease of over $2.3 million from the 2022 budget. And again, those fluctuations are simply due to changes in construction projects and those dollar totals. So we do quite often see a major fluctuation from year to year. This is a summary of our key changes for 2023. Most of those changes are driven by economic factors that are outside of our department. For example, we have a projected 10% increase in health insurance. We have had to increase calcium chloride because of the major increase in 2022 and a projected similar increase in 2023. Our increase in 2022 did not cover what the bids came in at, and so we have added another increase of $45,000 for 2023.
Lisa, if I could, excuse me, if I could interject just briefly, we have budgeted 10% for potential health insurance increases. We have not been notified by the Northeast Service Co-op that rates are going up that much. That's just the placeholder in the budget. So we're hoping the number comes in lower, but that's how much we have planned for that expenditure. So.
And again, once we have the final numbers, we will revise our budget up accordingly. So one of the other major increases is in utilities and fuel. And if you had looked at the draft budget, you will see some notes on the side. What we did for fuel was we contacted one of our suppliers, got some background, quite interesting background on the geopolitical situation, and asked him to give us some estimates for next year. And so we've used those estimates, and then we did a 5-year usage average on our gallons. And so we are looking at a 47,000, I've got so many numbers running through, a little over $47,000 increase, 720 increase in fuel with $4 a gallon for unleaded and $5 per gallon for diesel based on our transport prices that we are estimating. We do have a slight increase in our miscellaneous services and maintenance to accommodate fluctuations in bridge inspections and also to cover the training that we are doing for our maintenance workers. years now. After years of not being able to do that, we have a really good contract with the 49ers Training Center to get them down there. And so we are wanting to incorporate that into the budget. We have a $15,000 increase in regular maintenance projects. The purpose of that is to allow us to contract for one contracted bituminous patch or asphalt patch every year. You drive our roads, you know that we have sections that really need to be done, but they need to be contracted in order to be done appropriately, and those do run about $25,000 per patch. And so the purpose of that is to increase that to $25,000 so that we can start doing some of those in conjunction with some of our major construction projects. We have allocated $150,000 to a local roads program fund, similar to what the sheriff was talking about. We have these unmet needs, and this really speaks to the 5-foot to 9.9-foot culverts that have no other funding options in any funding source that we've come across. And you know, some of those can be upwards of $200,000 to $300,000 depending on how the engineering determines the long-term flowage need. And so we need to start setting aside money because they are failing. And then we are scheduled to use $447,453 of our cash next year, and we'll talk about where that's going to go when we get to our construction projects, because we have some matches next year on our building projects. There is an expense summary by each of our divisions within the Highway Department up on the board, and that's just a brief overview. We're going to get into some of those in detail. You can see that calcium chloride has increased in the last 2 years from $200,000 to $275,000 to accommodate the increasing prices. And then I'm going to give you some quick notes. I do this every year. Administration covers 3 staff salaries and a variety of administrative expenses. The most unusual note is that it covers all of our engineering technician training and certification. State aid requires that. They say that that is not project specific, it is an administrative expense. And to get a new technician certified is easily $25,000 for all of the certifications that they need. And so that goes under administration. Maintenance covers the salaries of our maintenance superintendent, our maintenance supervisor, our maintenance technician, and all of our maintenance worker 2s and 3s, those individuals who are out grading and plowing and graveling and doing all of the work out on our roads. It also covers all of those supplies. A couple of the big ones are noted there, but it's also your signs, your protective gear for the guys, you know, out in the field, just a plethora of things that people don't even really give pause to. And so it covers all of that. The shop budget includes the wages of the shop foreman and the mechanic, all of our equipment parts, all of the fuel with that $48,000 and change increase, and then our facility maintenance and utilities. And then work for others / AWC, or authorized work contribution, covers the fuel sold to our joint power fuel facility partners. So that would include county cars, the sheriff's office, search and rescue, MnDOT, ISD 166, the hospital, and the airport. It also includes any other miscellaneous items we might sell, and then those authorized work items where we are directed to do things but we're not billing. For example, the Forest Service agreement where we plow the grade in the winter falls under authorized work contribution, and we have some other ones as well. So that's just the summary for you. And then I want you to see our revenue summary, which has expanded greatly. Thank you, Engineer Haas. We have so many new revenue sources up on the board this year, and I'm sure that will continue. So the bulk of the revenues come from state and federal construction grants at a total of $7.78 million, state aid maintenance at $1.5 million, and then the levy at $2.5 million. And then we're going to go through our construction projects just so you can see where some of those revenue sources are going. And it's another way for us to answer any project questions that might come up for 2023. So for 2023, we showed 9 active road and bridge projects. The first one is the Flute Reed River Bridge on County Road 69. It has one of those special grants that Engineer has secured, the Bridge Replacement Off-System, or BROS grant, with some funding match from the Transportation Sales Tax Funds. The estimated cost, as you can see, is just under $1.3 million. And again, thanks to that grant, the impact on our local funds is much less significant. We have the much-anticipated reconstruction of Fifth Avenue West, or CSAH 15. We have secured a local road improvement grant, and then we will use a combination of regular and muni CSAH monies. We do expect to deplete our muni CSAH construction account next year and then go into the regular state aid construction account, which we can do. We have been saving for years, but it won't be quite enough. The estimated cost, we do have that inflated a little bit because of some uncertainties. We have it at $2.5 million. And then we're going to get to our 2 building projects. The salt sand storage is the first one. As the board is aware, we did advertise once already this year. The cost came in quite high. We have chosen, at the board's direction, to re-advertise this fall. We can fund that 59% with state aid monies based on the state formula, and then the rest will be coming from local funds. And right now, we are estimating $870,000 for the cost. The other building that we have is our storage building. And the original intent was to replace a failing cold storage building. We have been doing a lot of assessment of our storage needs, and we are designing a heated storage building which will house some of our cold storage, but also will help us relocate our graders and pickups, which are either jammed into our cold storage, our global building, or simply parked outside. And we were actually visiting with Josh Dix this morning, and I was saying that for someone who's not in the global building every day, it's amazing to me that we haven't had an accident out there, because it is so jam-packed, and literally trying to get graders and plow trucks out in the winter is a scary proposition at best. And Josh said it is truly a miracle, because he said if you watched one of our grader operators, our senior one, articulate and have inches after we've already moved 3 trucks out, it's amazing that no one has gone through a building or decimated another piece of equipment. So by going to the most recent design, we can take some of that stress out of that building and hopefully avoid any future issues. And it's not that it was anyone's fault, it's just that when that building was constructed in 2000, the size of the equipment was smaller. And as the equipment has grown, it has become much more constrained and a little more dangerous. So,
and leaving equipment out in the weather that costs, in the 6 figures, sometimes high 6 figures, doesn't make a lot of sense long term.
Yeah, most of our pickups right now are parked outside because we simply have to keep all of our diesel units in the heated storage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have a major concern.
Yeah.
So, anyway, again, this will be funded 59% with state aid monies and the balance with local funds. And right now, the estimated cost is just over $1 million. Back to road and bridge projects outside of the facility. We have the Sawbill Creek Bridge up on the Upper Sawbill Trail, or County Road 49. We have state bridge bond allocation with a TST match. And Engineer Hess, can you talk about the state bridge bond concern?
Yeah, there's, so state bridge bonds is another mechanism we can do. It's legislatively appropriated. And so the concern right now is, after this last session, no bonding bill was passed. And so, it's kind of a rolling account, which is nice. And I think last time I checked, it was pretty darn healthy. Typically with bridge bonds, it's kind of first come, first serve. So the sooner we can get plans done, you're kind of, here you go, give me my money, type of thing. And so we're finishing up those plans right now, and so hopefully, we can get into the pot before it runs out. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting, all the different funding options and how it does tie together, where if they don't, pass a bonding bill, we can't do construction. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And that's important because there's more than one bridge with bridge bond money. The next bridge, Jungle River Bridge on Ball Club Road, or County Road 27, actually leverages several other grants and special accounts. So we have a National Fish Passage grant, a State Park Road account, or SPRA grant, our CRISA allocation that came through from MnDOT in 2021 that we could save for a project is also being spent on this, and then a small TST match for just over $559,000.
Excuse me.
Yes.
CRISA, can you tell me what CRISA is?
COVID.
It's like a COVID money.
that came from the
Okay.
state directly
Just-
for the
Yeah.
highway department.
So the county as a whole got CRISA allocations that were much larger than this. There was another pot of money that was allocated to MnDOT with a special funding formula to then be distributed to the states for either construction or maintenance. And this was Cook County Highway Department's MnDOT CRISA construction or maintenance allocation. And if you look at our 2021 annual report, behind the annual summary of highway information, there is a separate page just for this money to show we haven't spent it yet, and we have to allocate it, report it every year until we do spend it, and then show them how we've spent it.
Thank you.
And I just lost what it's response and recovery. I can't remember what the darn allocation
COVID money.
or
for the highway.
acronym is.
Could that money be used for the cold storage building?
No.
Okay, thank you.
It could not. There is state statute and rules very specifically about how we can do that, and we had to use the formula of either our CSAH mileage or our annual CSAH maintenance proration, and then have the county board pass a resolution, which it did, to use that formula, and then the rest has to be strictly local funds.
Thank you.
The Alfred Creek Bridge on County Road 28 also has state bridge bond allocations. And where are we with the plans on that one, Engineer Hess?
I think both of them, both Alfred Creek and Sawbill Creek are pretty darn close to being done right now. I know Alfred Creek's, currently it's a culvert. We're replacing it with a concrete slab, actually, just due to the site conditions there. And so that has the extra layer of going through the bridge office. If it's a culvert, they don't have to go through the bridge office, despite, it gets complicated, culvert bridge, whatever. In short, if it's more of a traditional bridge, not a culvert, it has to go through the state aid bridge office. So it's just one extra layer of review on it. And so I think we went through there and they had a few comments, and our consultants were picking those up, and it should be done pretty darn soon, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. And then is of course, the $50,000 TST match. The next bridge up in Grand Portage is located on CSAH 17. This is that collaborative project that we've been working on with the Timber Bridge. Again, some state bridge bond money, and then the balance will come from state aid, over $1 million projected for a total cost of $1.5 million. And there is some realignment of the road going on as well because of the intersection there. So. And then, the project that we just talked about earlier, the state aid striping, when we had submitted this, we had an estimated cost of $100,000, and of course, it's come in slightly below that, which is good news.
Well, stripe, for what it's worth. Striping, we don't know yet. Crack
Oh,
sealing.
oh dear, I'm sorry.
We're shooting for 100.
We're shooting for 100. I have done that all year this year. For some reason, I have it in my mind that we've been working on the striping when we're working on crack sealing. I do apologize. Nanette's corrected me a couple times. For some reason, I have a mental block about that.
It's because of the toilet paper stuff.
Now you know what it is.
Yes, and it is actually, depending on the contractor, toilet paper, just for your information. So, capital expenditures. We do, of course, have the board-approved capital expenditure plan, and so this is a summary of what is slated for purchase or replacement in 2023. We do have a tandem axle plow truck, and you can see we're at just under $286,000 for that. We have a carryover that we have delayed for several years as we've looked at municipal sidewalk needs, and I think now that we're a little further along with the Fifth Avenue West discussion, The department is ready to commit to that purchase of about $75,000. We do have another greater warranty extension. We have allocation for armor radios, and I was wondering if Commissioner Hawkins was thinking about our recurring line item the last couple of years, because ours are quite old, and we do have to be making some upgrades. And then we do have our scheduled excavator payment, which comes out of our lease budget, our prior lease budget, which the board had approved. We have the 5 annual payments with a balloon payment then at the end. In terms of personnel changes, we budgeted for the 3.5% negotiated COLA and normal step increases, and then the projected 10% increase in health insurance. Together, these comprise a $137,735 increase in our personnel budget. And our levy increase request for 2023 is $115,000, as shown earlier in the presentation. So we have tried to leverage every funding source we can to keep our levy increase at the minimum that we can. And questions?
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't think there were I wasn't surprised by much, just the, more discussion about the cold storage facility and turning it into a heated storage facility. And that, I understand the reason behind that, and it makes sense. We really want to use best practice for storing our equipment and keeping it alive as long as possible. So that makes a whole lot of sense. I am surprised at $1 million, and maybe this is not fair to compare, but the city maintenance building up on top of the hill there was significantly more than that, and there's more facilities, running water and the like, in that.
Do you know how big that one
well,
is?
No, but
Yeah.
Not off top of my mind here, but I was thinking about that too. So, but you feel pretty comfortable with the $1 million?
No,
as far as
that's incredibly preliminary.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think, and it gets to our discussion of estimates and exactly
Yeah.
what that is, and it's an estimate.
Yep.
Where this is our best first. I had a conversation with the architects. Hey, we want a 60 by 100 building, heating it. What do you think? Pole barn type style with a slab. And, am I out of line for thinking right around $1 million? Nope. Okay. Somewhere to start.
Sure.
But that number, for example, on some projects that we'll do, especially with grant funding, you'll change the estimate 4 or 5 times throughout the life of that project. Because it's not only, it's what do you roughly think it is? All right, let's have a conversation to see if we can even ballpark this thing. Cool. And then you start, developing plans and stuff. And so at this point with the architects, we're kind of narrowing down the plans. And so once we get preliminary drawings, then we can sit there and say, along with that, here's another preliminary estimate. And so you can see that, go up or down depending. And so then there's that number, and then you get done with the plans. Now that's another number, and so in theory they should all be pretty close, but this is very, very rough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for the new building, just for a little perspective, what's the size difference between the old cold storage building?
I know, we were just talking about that this morning, and I can't remember. So the new one, we're trying to just trying to do the biggest thing that we can there that meets our needs, that meets our needs.
Yeah.
And so, we're looking at something that's about 60 by 100. I think what's currently there, I feel like it was like 80. It wasn't as big.
Okay.
God, I can't remember.
That's okay. I was just looking for, so a little bit bigger.
Yeah. It's actually, for what it's worth, the Hovland garage, about the same size as that.
Okay.
That is more or less 60 by 100. So same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Commissioner, I'm
Please.
sorry, if I may, the design, as we are looking at it right now, has a separate area that is strictly just for the graders to get them out of the Goebel building. And so it's partitioned with a wall, and then the other side will be more focused on pickups and all of our signs and all of the other smaller
Steamers.
things, steamers that go typically in and out of some of our cold storage or heated storage, because we do have to have the steamers somewhere where they don't freeze. But it's split into two, and so those graders, because they are such a massive piece of equipment and there's such safety concerns around them, they would be in a walled-off separate portion that's strictly, basically drive-through for them to get in.
Yep. And, yeah, my memory is pretty rough, but for whatever reason, I had it in my mind that what we allocated for the city project was $4 million, and then it came in at 2.7. Big discrepancy there, but in
Yeah.
our favor. But that's quite a bit more than the 1 million. But
I'm not gonna
again,
be
size
surprised
is,
if
it's
it-
not apples to apples, so.
Yeah, and yeah, there's, and that's something we've talked about too, is, this is still, it's heated storage. And so what do we need up there? Do we need a wash bay? No, we can get away without that, so now we're not running water, for example.
Right.
Which I know that alone is a big cost.
Oh, yeah.
So not doing that, I can sit here and run through kind of what I've put together, but
No, it's okay. I was just trying to talk
Sure.
about our expectations and
Totally.
potential, costs.
Yeah,
there.
and I'm not going to be surprised if it goes up, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But there is a threshold where we'll either have to save up more, that's just what it is, or reassess and say, we can't pull the trigger on this. Maybe it does go back to being cold storage, which still meets it just meets a different set of needs. We have needs, we've talked about that, and which group do we want to meet now? Which one do we want to incorporate into capital improvement plans throughout the county? So right now, we just looked at our needs and said, hey, we have the opportunity to meet one that affects us every single day in the winter, and we know how long winter is here.
Yeah. No, I certainly applaud that,
Sure.
and I would much prefer to build for the longer term and to meet our longer term needs, so I'm in full support of whatever that is. I just wanted to
Sure.
raise the bar with our cost expectations.
Totally.
And Commissioner, with the city facility, that included all the offices.
Right, yeah.
And so that is, in my mind, the major cost factor that we aren't having to deal with.
Yeah.
And so, you start doing all the structure as well as all of the
Interior,
content
yeah.
for an office building.
Absolutely,
That would, I think, be a major driver.
yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Swallowson.
In your preliminary budget, did you factor in any use of your fund balance as far as your estimates?
That 400 and, let me pull my number back out so I give you the exact number.
And we'll be talking about the use of fund balance in highway, PHHS, and the general fund later in the meeting.
Later in the meeting?
Okay.
And yes, Commissioner, we're projecting to use $447,453 of our cash balance to help fund, in particular, those two building projects. We have been trying to save the last couple of years in anticipation for this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Not that,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner.
I do have another question, just clarification. Talking about Forest Service and Forest Service roads, and we get, $150,000 from Superior National Forest and Lands. Is that for plowing and maintaining the grade? Or what do they give us $150,000 for?
They like us.
Yeah, that's a statutory, that, I don't think it's tied specifically to any particular work out there. So we've gotten this federal aid, it's one of our federal aid programs, there's 3 of them. And this one's Secure Rural Schools, which it's basically split 50-50 between the school and the highway department. And then we also get a little bit, that's 7% for Firewise. So that's what that is, but there's no language in there specifically tying it to something like plowing a road.
Okay, that's.
Grading a road.
Because we do that, Ben, we don't charge extra for that, correct?
We have a cooperative agreement with the Forest Service, and the intent of that, in particular to the grade, is that it is the only detour route if something were to fail on Highway 61. And so therefore, it is the board's determination years ago in conjunction with the Forest Service that it's our responsibility to keep that open in the winter. We do not do summer maintenance.
Okay. And discussion about taking over more of Forest Service roads. I just wanted to know, I saw this and thought, oh, maybe that was part of that. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, if not, thank you very much for your presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now we'll return on our agenda back to item 4, public hearing, and we're looking at item B, which is the public hearing regarding fee schedule changes. The first group that will be presenting, and I believe Sarah Waddle is here to talk about the Cook County Community Center rental fees proposal. So Sarah, if you'd like to come forward. Good morning, and thank you for waiting.
No problem. Thanks for taking a look at our fee schedule with us. We took a look at this with the Community Center Board earlier this year, first at the historic fee schedule, and then gathered just some information from the first part of this year and the time that Leanne and I have been working at the Community Center, and came up with some changes to the fee schedule to bring it a little more into alignment with what people's expectations of what had been happening were. I think there was some just misalignment with what was on paper and what was actually going on for many groups. And then also simplifying the prices. We found the previous version of the fee schedule to be pretty confusing for the public to figure out which category they fell in for which types of rentals. So just kind of simplifying overall. And then the last key change that we've highlighted there is we are proposing to have 2 different prices for when somebody wants to rent the entire facility, which typically happens for weddings. One price for residents of the county who are renting that facility, and one for non-residents out of honoring the fact of the additional time that goes into working with somebody who's coming from out of town to rent our facility for a wedding, the additional staff time and needs that they have with questions when they haven't been here or seen the facility before, and also just honoring the fact that residents are already contributing towards the facility through their tax dollars. So those are the key changes to highlight, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions folks have about the proposal.
Questions or comments for Sarah? Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for looking at this and updating it, having the discussions with the Community Center Board. They still seem like very fair prices, and it's wonderful spaces for our community to use. So just really appreciate the attention that it's getting.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? All right.
I would just like to publicly thank Sarah and Leanne for the work that they're doing to update processes at the community center and make it a better experience for users. You know, Sarah's been on the job less than a year and has just already done some really transformational work there, and really grateful for your efforts, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
last thing I'll just highlight is that in addition to updating the fee schedule, there's also now a space on the county website for the public, if they're interested in renting the facility, to fill out a form right on the website to make that request, and also has all the information about the rooms and facilities available. So it's a little more transparent that way.
It's transparent and it's user-friendly. We
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Mhm.
Definitely. All right, great. So the next item on here would be the permit to carry fees, and I see Sheriff Eliason is back with us.
Hi again.
Good morning again.
We wanted to discuss increasing the permit to carry fees I brought this to the board, I don't know, it was quite a few years ago. These fees have been the same, they've been static ever since I've been the sheriff for the last 8 years, and I don't know if they were ever increased from when they were set originally or not. Now, I'm kind of half and half on increasing the fees. I realize that the county should be providing services for the community. And we are not trying to make money by increasing fees. We are just trying to cover our costs and, end up at a zero sum for the end product. So my administrative assistant, Britta, put this together, and you can see that a new fee for a Minnesota resident is $50, and for an out-of-state person, it's $75. The renewal for a resident is $35, and for out-of-state is $55. And then if you need a replacement card or you've changed your address, that is a $10 fee as well. So we are proposing to bump it up to, for a Minnesota resident, bump it from $50 to $75, and for an out-of-state person, $75 to $100. And you will see on, where is it here? On the bottom of page 2, Britta has it broken down. It takes about 30 minutes on the average for her to complete the background checks and the necessary paperwork and all of that to process a permit to carry. And her wage is $26.58 an hour divided by 2, which is $13.29, which leaves a $5.29 deficit to the county for her just to process the permit. And then she also has it broken down for the card printer that we need to purchase for these specific cards, the ink ribbon, the cards themselves, the blank cards. We have to print copies of everybody's application, photocopies, the letters, the envelopes, the postage, the whole works. So when you add it all up, it's $66.45 to process one permit to carry. Then when you add the supplies in, is another $9.56, which puts it up to $76.01 for the permit. We collect $50 for that, so it puts us in the hole. When you add the state fee, $36.01. And for the, yes, so when you also go to the bottom of page 4, she added this in there, that she had some examples for the fees from other counties. In Lake County, the resident and non-resident is $100, and the renewal is $75 to $85, depending on the time. St. Louis County is $70 and replacement is $10. Carlton County is $100 across the board, and you can see those comparisons. So, like I said, we are not trying to make money off the public. That is never our intention. What I thought I would just bring to the board, and the decision's up to you ultimately. But to if we want to continue with the fees, on one hand, if we continue with the fees that we have right now, we get more fees because we're one of the lowest ones in the state. And the way the permit to carry works is that if you're a Minnesota resident, you have to apply in the county you live in. If you're not resident, you can apply in any county you want to. So, of course, people shop around. They're going to look for the most inexpensive county that they can find to get their permit, which I don't blame them for. So we probably get more volume that way, but in the end, it's going to cost time, staff time, and materials. So I will take any questions now.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sheriff Eliason, for breaking that down. And yeah, your point is well taken about the more volume, but if the public is, if it's costing the public more with that more volume, then yeah, that's just a lose-lose for the public. So it makes a whole lot of sense to increase the fees, and I appreciate you and Britta looking at it really analytically, and the comparisons are really helpful too. Would we still be the cheapest if we raised them to the proposed?
Do we want to answer that question publicly?
I don't know. I mean, in the comparisons we have there, you know, it would be, but I don't know statewide.
Sure,
I
yeah,
have no
yeah.
idea.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Well, I know I'm personally very appreciative of the fact that we're raising the fees. I personally support that and think that we should be charging at least what it costs. So I would be in favor of these increases or even more. Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you. I am wondering why we aren't matching Lake County and Carleton County. I mean, by your figuring today, we just covered the cost if we raised to 75. But we haven't factored in benefits and increases and step increases.
Correct.
And not looking at this as a moneymaker, but I also wonder about it not costing other taxpayers to provide this service. So I would support maybe even a higher fee.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Thank you. I never gave it a thought that people shop around for these permits. So I'm wondering now, look at the marriage licenses in the paper. Maybe we should check into that. There's a lot of out-of-state marriage licenses. Anyway, one project at a time, but yes, I think we need to at least cover our costs. And, you know, I would support at least this. And review it. It's been, what, 8, 9 years since this has been looked at?
I can't remember when I brought it to the board. It was in my first term. It would in the first or second year of my first
it's
term.
about-
Yeah.
So maybe we also need to say we'll review it again in, you know, a couple of years or 3, whatever, but yeah. I support your idea for sure.
Absolutely. Other questions or comments? Commissioner Mills.
To Commissioner Hawkins' point, do we just want to bump it up $5 to ensure that further costs, or what is the board's thought there? Or
That's
Sheriff, if
certainly
you-
what I'm thinking,
Yeah. Above what the proposal is?
above the proposed
Is that,
fee.
does that bother you, Sheriff?
Doesn't bother me at
Okay.
all.
And that would give us parity with Lake and St. Louis?
Not quite. It would still keep us competitive.
Okay. Because, yeah, I think there's value in making sure that people aren't automatically coming to Cook County for that, because it is a burden. As you've mentioned recently, Sheriff, with staffing issues, you know, we don't necessarily want to be the place where people go for their permits, so.
I was reading this wrong then. So more than $5 is maybe what the board is looking for.
I certainly think we should cover our costs.
Yes.
And I think that's just an important thing to do, and can't imagine anybody being concerned about us covering our costs.
No.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And I would say probably a $5 increase. And if somebody wants to spend the gas money to get here, yeah, really? I don't know that
Right.
$20 is gonna make a big difference.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if we were to raise the Minnesota resident to $80, and for a new one and a renewal to $60, and then I would recommend that we revisit this in a couple of years with some data. That we collect some information and we look at some other counties. How do other commissioners feel about that?
Madam Chair, I think that's a great idea, and I do appreciate the data that Sheriff Larson brought forward here, and it'd just be good to do that again in the future, just to see how things are playing out.
Auditor Powers, any comments or questions?
No, I'm totally in favor of covering your costs. It's what's really called for in the statute, and it makes perfect sense. So,
Madam Chair, would you want to adjust the cost for out-of-state permits too?
I'm looking at those out of state, and I'm just thinking other places. I'm wondering if we could do a new and a renewal for $100.
Madam Chair, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just want to point out that my understanding is that the $100 does cover the costs. It's that
Okay,
the
maybe.
out-of-state is helping cover the costs of the
Right.
residents. But if we insure that with that $5 bump, then we're doubly insured. So I don't know that we need to.
Okay, that
bump
makes sense.
But I'm not against it either. How's that? But we're still in public hearing, is that right?
We are.
Yeah.
We are. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this? I do see some other members of the public here. Anyone else who'd like to speak? All right. Well, thank you very much, Sheriff Eliason.
Thank you.
All right.
Madam Chair, there was one more request. This was a request from the MIS department, simply to delete some of the fees from the schedule. I can just read from Roland. He says they're all quite dated. I think we can retain the 2 plotter fees highlighted below as a means of capturing large format custom map requests. But web maps and Avenza Geo PDF maps have drastically cut down on the number of custom map requests, printed and electronic. With the passing of open data resolution, we are charging for GIS data customers can self-serve via our open data portal. So if a certain data set isn't available, they work with the requester to either post data to the site or share the data directly. Most of them come from partner organizations. We don't really provide printed services such as labels and query results any longer. Tax system queries are largely handled by the assessor's office. So asking to delete all the so marked items.
Absolutely. Kind of nice to see the word delete.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right. Well, we shall close the public hearing at this point and move on to the auditors.
And then could we have a motion to approve the proposed fee changes?
Oh, you want to do it at this meeting? Okay.
I will make that motion.
So we have a motion to approve the said changes in fees. Is there a second?
With the amendment to the permit to carry.
Yes, with the
Second.
amendment.
Yes.
All right, and Commissioner Mills did a second with the amendment?
Correct.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, could we take a short break?
We will do that. We'll take a short break and reassemble at 10 o'clock. Thank you. right, well, it's about 10 o'clock, and so we're resuming our meeting after a short recess, and Auditor Powers has a number of items on today's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First item is the Grand Marais Library budget. This is just information at this point. It's a reminder that we have a joint powers agreement with the city for library services, and under that agreement, if the expenses or the levy request is under 5%, we can comment, of course, and discuss it, et cetera. If the proposed levy is above 5%, we have the ability under that agreement to reject it and ask them to go back and come back. And so this one is higher than 5%. And just noting, it's pretty obvious when you look at it that it's the health insurance proposed increase. So probably, I don't know exactly who they get it from and when they get their final numbers, but I'm assuming we'll probably learn of that about the same time we learn of our own. So this may or may not be a point of discussion with the city. So I think it's prudent to wait until we hear more on that score. But we'd have to make our
Stink.
well, our wishes known to them prior to the proposed budget date, September 30th. So
Right,
yeah.
right. So we have some time
Yeah.
here, but thank you. And we certainly understand that they have a significant increase related to insurance, and we hope their numbers come back significantly less
Yeah.
than they're anticipating.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think they're being very prudent, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So the second item is the Economic Development Abatement Resolutions. So we had the public hearing, and there were no comments in opposition, so it asks for a motion to approve.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Spallison. Is there support?
Support, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. We have a motion and support for our amended resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Can I go back and ask a question about the library budget?
Oh,
Yeah.
certainly.
I really appreciate you putting the agreement in there to read. I was kind of surprised to see that we're supposed to get quarterly actual expenditures on a actual expenditures on a quarterly basis to both the city and the county. Does that report go somewhere? Does it go to your office?
I don't see the report.
Okay. And then I also noticed that our ALS contribution is supposed to be deducted from our half. Is
It
that
is,
been-
yeah.
Okay, so that number that shows the budget and the county's portion really is going to be reduced by $29,000 or whatever
Yeah, if
that
you,
amount is.
yeah, there's a department for the library budget, and you'll see it broken out by the half less the ALS portion and the ALS, and then it adds up to the half. Because the ALS portion is in that total budget, so
Right. but
we
it-
just have the responsibility to make that payment as a county.
Okay, I just wanted to make
Sure.
sure.
Yep.
The way
it's
it
not
was
a
written there, it looked like we were going to pay the half
Plus, no.
plus. Okay,
Just half.
Just want to clarify that.
Just gets broken.
And whoever was responsible for that agreement, I'm just really glad they thought about increases on a natural basis, unlike some of our other contracts with the city. So just
Yeah.
foresight put into that one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a long time agreement. It predates my time here. It's that old.
Is that even possible?
So more than 30 years ago.
More than 30 years ago.
All right.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify those things. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Looks like Carol Greshik.
Yes.
I don't know if that was even the first, but maybe it was. The next item is a revolving loan fund request by Joshua Brittany Furr. It's for construction of a multipurpose workshop and an owner-occupied apartment for a $75,000 loan they're looking for, with collateral being the first position on the real estate. and a UCC on a piece of equipment that they wish to buy with some of that funding. And subject to, we're asking it to be subject to confirming that independent access to the property that they'd be offering for collateral to our satisfaction. We've not done that yet, but it would be subject to that to make sure. And a 5% increase in the interest rate on the 2-year anniversary date if the project is not complete and occupied by the owner. The reason for that is they've been working up here seasonally for the last few years, and his wife works here also seasonally, and we just know how long construction projects can take. And the committee doesn't want to set the precedent of funding seasonal ownership properties, so they make a strong intent to be here, but we just want to put an encouragement, a strong encouragement for them to get it done and to be here within the 2-year period.
Thank you so much for your explanation, and I appreciate the fact you talked about it being an owner-occupied apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their long-range plan would be to live there in order to work here, but they're not building their dream home, and they wish to build on their other property for the long term. And then this would be potentially, right now, that could be workforce housing for staff, so.
All right. Well, thank you for that explanation. Very helpful. So any further discussion or questions for Auditor Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner
Thank you, Auditor Powers. What does UCC stand for?
Oh, Uniform Commercial Code. It's at the state, Secretary of State's office, where you can file a lien on a piece of property in your name, so that if, as your collateral.
Other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And best foot forward, but it does give me pause when we're talking about using the real estate as collateral.
Yeah, they've got 2 properties, so it's the other property, but actually both are available, but. Yes.
And I'll just mention that was discussed during our meeting, and that was the clause in there that we make sure there is reasonable access to that property. And so where are we in that process of
We haven't looked yet.
ensuring
So that'll
that is
have to be a
true?
condition. The loan's not approved
Okay.
until we
Okay.
just, confirm that.
Commissioner Mills?
Only other thing I'd say is this is an interest. This would be setting a precedent here, and in my mind, not a bad one for encouraging people to look for help from the revolving loan fund to move here and live here and work here. And I just think that's a really powerful tool that we have. And this is a very interesting opportunity that is being proposed. So I like it. I hope others pay attention and take note and try to follow through if they can as well.
Other questions, comments? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. We have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. The last item is a request by residents on the, what do we call it? The private Arrowhead Trail Road at the end of the Arrowhead Trail around the McFarland Lake area to establish a subordinate service district. So at this time, the request is to set a public hearing at a future date to consider that. And you got some preliminary information in the packet. The And then I sent additional information just this morning. Yes, I see it, it did make it. April got it in, thank you. So you've got the actual petition form, the map, and some explanation regarding the map. And Stephen, can you pronounce your last name for me?
A-U-L-I-E.
How do you pronounce that?
Ollie.
Ollie. Okay, thanks. Stephen Ollie and Myron Bersheim are here to speak to that request. If you guys, could you come forward? And
There's a microphone available for each of you up front. So as you get started, if you could just introduce yourself and share your address.
Okay, so I'm Stephen Ollie. I go by Steve. Live in Duluth, but have had a cabin up on McFarland Lake since 1991, so 30 years, 31 years. And I guess I'm kind of the one that kind of spearheading this petition with a lot of support from a lot of my neighbors up there on the lake. So the short of it is basically, ever since we've been up there, this private road that runs in from the Airy Point turnoff into the to the west end of the lake there. The road was in pretty bad shape when we started out going up there back in '91, but over the time period, more and more people have bought property up there and built cabins, and we've tried to improve the road or keep it passable. Basically, it's with everybody kind of pitching in where we could, to like patch things up and make it, so it's still pretty rough road going back in there. So over the years, I think about 3 times there's been a concerted effort to improve it, and I think one of the last, or one of them about 15 years ago, I think, Myron kind of spearheaded an effort to use some Firewise grant money with matching funds from the property owners, and at that point did some substantial improvements to it. And some property owners contributed, some didn't. It was kind of a voluntary deal. And now with this year's flooding and everything, our road really took a beating, and it was kind of in pretty tough shape before that even, but it's just time that I thought, well, let's take a look at, Myron had provided me some information about, the possibility of doing a subordinate service district, and that way, involving everybody to contribute, and to upgrade the road so that it's, not trying to make the road wider or anything, kind of the same dimensions, but it's overgrown with, the ditches are overgrown with brush, and maybe needs some re-ditching, and then definitely needs lots of, some gravel and grading and sloping and some culvert replacements. So, yeah, I took that information. I initially had an email addresses for a number of people up there on the lake that using the road, and I sent that kind of a thing around. They drafted a petition and sent it around for potential support, and had a really good showing of support from the people that I had contact information from. And in fact, I think the petition that I've submitted here, I think we have like 24 signatures now, and one email thread that supports it, and that's out of like 49 property owners up there. And then when it came time to get the map, and then kind of outlay that, all the parcels involved, we also got mailing labels for all the property owners. So then I sent out a packet of information explaining what we're trying to do, and along with the petition and the map, and kind of a rough estimate of what we could come up with potential costs for the initial improvements. And So that went out to everybody about a week ago. I've had a couple of responses back, but, so I'm trying to be transparent with everybody that's affected by, having to share the cost of taking care of the road. So upgrading it initially back to kind of where it was 15 years ago, and then maintaining it on a year-to-year basis, which would be, I think, a lot less expensive part of the deal. So I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I selected a cost-sharing option of this travel by distance assessment rate, so that people further down the road pay a proportionate cost a little bit higher than the initial ones, because we use more of the road. And one amendment that I'm proposing is to limit the cost-sharing tax assessments to only those tax parcels that have improvements, a cabin and a driveway or a walking path off of the road to be maintained, or an access road that intersects that. Basically, those people that are using the road to get to their cabins, and that would exclude tax parcels or someone has no improvements to them. So I think that ends up being, there are 61 tax parcels that I saw in the map that was provided. 11 of the tax parcels had no improvements of a driveway or pathway to a cabin. So it came down to like 50 tax parcels to share the costs using the TDAR assessment method. And I think 46 of the owners actually have 2 cabins and separate driveways. So there would be like really 46 owners sharing the costs of this in 50 tax parcels.
And about half of them had responded, I think, by email,
Yeah.
a little over.
Yeah.
And more are coming in now. Typically, we bring these to you when we have let's say, a bigger majority before we even look at them and set a public hearing. But I suggested this would be the first time to look at it in order to set it at a time where people could more likely be here for a public meeting if they had, whether they're pro or anti. We've discovered in the past, trying to do it in the late fall, for example, people will then complain and say, I didn't get a chance, I couldn't get up there that time of year, et cetera. So it's probably prudent to take a look at it, at least, if you're going to consider it earlier when more people could be here. And we discussed the statute. It has 2 methods for starting it. By petition is one, and the other is by county board initiative. By petition, you have to decide what a qualified voter is, and we've never legally figured out what that is. We've looked at it with several county attorneys, et cetera, and never settled on a definition, whether it's a registered voter. The tightest one would be a registered voter living in Cook County. It could be a registered voter living in the state. It could be out of state. It doesn't define it.
Right.
So to get around that, or to, let's say, not deal with that ip, the board can make their own decision as to whether it's a good use of our services, but use the petition process to tell you that people are in favor of it or not. So we've done it that way in the past. And so the question, I mean, you can ask specific questions, but as regarding this, it would be to decide whether to set a public hearing date and how far out to set that. And, how long before you would get, let's say, we could determine strong majority support or not, and find that out.
My intent is to follow up with the mailing that I sent out to everybody, the people that I haven't been able to contact, follow up with them and ask them are you in support of this or not? And if you are in support, could you send, or you send a statement of support, or send, or I have them just sign a petition, or send an, some kind of an email response back to me,
Yeah.
showing that they're in favor.
Yeah, in this day and age, an email response,
Is-
if it's sufficient, if it has all the information of the request, the entire proposal, and you can see that they're approving that, email is fine. So, they could fill out, if they had the form, they could fill the form out, and
They all
email
have
it
the
back.
form now, because they sent
Yeah.
them a printed copy of it, so they could, I could have them just send that in too, or ask them to do that, or email, whatever.
Yeah, it's just, the key is that they understand what the full proposal is, so.
So I think before we make a decision or talk about dates, is there anything, Myron, you would like to add since you have been a part of this?
Well, Steve's done an excellent job. I'm Myron Bersheim. I live in Grand Marais and I'm his neighbor at McFarland Lake. And I think I've been up there. I hit my place about 2 years after you did somewhere. So we've been up there a while. He's done an excellent job in doing a lot of work, and I think we have met, and I think just for background information of why we're here now is that there was some confusion on our part of what we were going to do. We thought maybe a vote was an option because that would be the easiest way to do it. And so this petition thing sort of has changed or has altered the plan and approach that we're going to make, especially the timing. So otherwise, I think we could have done it a little differently in the beginning, and I'll take the responsibility for that because I interpreted it based upon my experience as a county board member when we dealt with this in 2019. Just to add one thing, about 15, 16 years ago, I took on a project to fix the road. And there was Firewise grant money available, and they would do a match. So we raised so much money, and then we got a match from Firewise. And the reason why we got the Firewise match was we had almost 1.7 miles of road that we're talking about here. There was one turnaround at the top of a hill. There was no pass outs. So if you had an emergency, and we did have some fires up there, a fire truck had to go all the way down, no turnaround. You had to just break through a grate or go down someone's driveway. So we got a turnaround, and then we got about 6 turnouts, so that at least when you're going up the hill, it's an uphill and a downhill, so that at some point in time you can turn off the road. Well, since then, a lot of that has washed out or it's not available. You can't see it. It's all grown up. So I think by going with this approach, we're going to continue and maintain the intent of that Firewise grant, which is emergency services. And so this request, I think, is also tied into that whole emergency operations end of it. Bob and I were just talking on the break about how important that is, because I think at one time before that we did this, we had an emergency up there and an ambulance couldn't get in. They just couldn't. There's no place to turn around. Couldn't get to that. Had to come in by boat. So, yeah, so it's got a public emergency purpose to it as well.
All right. That's helpful information. Very helpful. Commissioner Solison.
So I take it there's no homeowners association associated with that?
Or road association.
Or road association or anything like that? And so this, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that would have been one mechanism, but this is another way to do it, and that's how you've chosen as a group, as the vehicle to go.
Yeah, I could speak for myself. I know that having this available seems to be an appropriate way for us to go up there because we're really spread out. We come from all over the place, and so I know when you do that, you have to have meetings and so forth, and we had a picnic at one time, but, I tried to do that a little bit when I went out and solicited funds for the grant match. I talked to people about a road association, they didn't want to do that.
Okay, and that's fine.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure.
At that point in time, I think now people are really looking forward to this as something that is the appropriate way to go.
Okay.
Has there been any discussion with the highway department about their ability to do this?
I talked to Robbie Haas about a month ago, and I know there's a transition there in the department. I think the maintenance supervisor does it. So I know that there's a transition going on there, I believe. And so I know that the maintenance supervisor, Josh Dix, was involved in an emergency at our lake this winter, where we had an emergency where county had to come in and get some people out. And I won't get into that, and it was a great thing that was done. So I know he knows the road because I was there in the blizzard when they had to do this. So I talked to Robbie, and he just said, well, after I talked to Brady, and he said, well, they'll help with the bidding. I asked if they would help us in the specs, and I didn't get an affirmation of that. I don't know if it's a lack of understanding or not, but we do know that at least the bid process would be provided by the highway department. So Steve has put a lot of work into it, and I do have some recollections of the kinds of things because I was the project manager for the Firewise grant. And so we've got a pretty good idea what needs to be done. But he's gone out and walked the whole 1.7 miles, counted the culverts that need to be replaced, looked where the ditching needs to be done, and where the turnouts need to be I guess, made more visible and or accessible. So a figure has come up, but it's really hard to say what's going to happen. Hopefully there will be a bid process. And so that's my extent, or our extent. With the
Okay,
highway.
well, I appreciate the fact that you've
But they're
spoken
willing to
to
help in the future.
our highway engineer. That's great. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank
Yes,
you.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you for coming forward. We have a lot of subordinate districts in Cook County already, and there's more coming. Let me put it that way. So give me an idea on the Arrowhead. So you're going up the Arrowhead Road. Is it the last 1.7 miles that you're referring to?
So
How
you
much
go
of the road?
across, the road, you go across the bridge there. It's where the Arrowhead Trail, it's still called the Arrowhead Trail, but it would be the last, you turn off of the main Arrowhead Trail after you go across the bridge to the west.
Right, where
At that very
McFarland
point.
goes into Little John.
Yeah, right, that right there. So it's, the road to be maintained would start there and go 1.7 miles to the west. And there is where the established turnaround was created under the Firewise grant that Myron is talking about. So at that point, that would be where we would stop doing that part. That would be the end point of the road to be maintained. And then several years back, some property owners further to the west yet, they put another road in there. I think it's still, I don't know if it's still considered the Arrowhead Trail. I think it is all the way to the west, but that's a private road with a gate on it. And so our road would, where that starts, that would be their responsibility to maintain that part of that road. I considered that an access road in this petition, similar to the roads that go down, other access roads branch off with cabins along. So that's how we're kind of determine that travel by distance rate thing. It's outlined in your policy. So does that answer your question kind of as far?
Pretty
as
much. It's been a long time since I've been
Yeah,
up there, but maybe
yeah.
Myron will invite me back.
Well, I think we never got around to setting a
haven't,
date.
no. So all this time of this 1.7 miles, about how many people would live in that area?
Including all the branch offs, the access roads, and then that one that continues to the west, there's 49 owners.
Okay.
So 46 of them have cabins and
They would all be involved in having this improved? 46 homeowners?
46, yeah.
Okay. And who takes care of it in the winter?
We don't have winter access. We ski in the winter, and people have snowmobiles, and so it's not plowed in the wintertime.
So nobody helps out with
There's not many people out
clearing
there in
it?
the wintertime.
I believe only one property is homesteaded that I saw.
Right, and that's just recently, so.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Hawkins?
Yeah, I'm new to all this SGSD, and it has come up in our Highway Advisory Committee meetings before that our highway staff is feeling a little overwhelmed, and maybe, is there a fee associated with handling these SGSDs? And
Yes,
what
they
is
have
that
a,
fee?
they have a policy developed by the previous highway administration, and I don't have it in my head. It's 1,500 comes to mind per year, but I'll find it while you guys are talking.
I want to make
Brady,
sure that covers.
You have it.
Yeah, would it be helpful to just kind of give a short overview of how this works for the benefit of the public and also?
Me, being new here?
Because I think there may be an understanding that the highway department is actually doing this work, and that's not exactly.
No,
that's not
but
how it works.
the administration of it has been brought up in our highway department,
Right.
that it does,
Takes
working with the
time.
contractors.
Yep.
Doing the bidding.
For sure.
And I got the sense during that meeting that originally they were like, let's let homeowners associations do it, and let's not go down this road, because it does create more work.
Yeah, it does, but it, as James just said, it's primarily administrative, so they manage the bid process and the financial end of it. And then there are ongoing maintenance issues from year to year. So part of that policy, that got amended in the last few years, that there has to be one person, a representative that they vote on, so that they don't have to deal with multiple people coming to them with requests. So that's I think that's probably where, I should let them speak for themselves, where the additional work is when people are discussing the maintenance issues that are happening all summer long. Maybe there's washouts, et cetera, and then they have to deal with multiple people over that, and many, many phone calls. So that's why that's critical. But the sheer number of them is going to be a potential issue too, if there are many more of these. There's lots of end-of-the-road places in Cook County. And with people moving in, a lot of people moving in, a lot of property changing hands, you might look for more of these. I mean, we've had several that have, they propose, they talk about it, and then they drop it when they find out how difficult it is to get. This one is simpler than some because it's one stretch of road. But you get some that they get into the multiple junctions, and they want to include everybody in that. So I think it's ripe for looking at, I don't think Robbie has looked at it real hard since he just got here. It's ripe for looking at policies and refining some things so that we don't get overwhelmed. But
I have one more question related to that, Dan. So if we do set a public hearing to potentially assess these properties, is it your department's responsibility to notify those property owners? Or how does the county notify the property owners of this?
the only thing required in the law is to do public notice. In the past, we have, not always, but we have mailed to the property owner. I think that's I think that probably should be in the policy, that someone does that. But the only thing required is just a public notice. Newspaper.
That doesn't seem quite fair to me. I don't know if I was an adjoining property owner and
Well, yeah.
didn't know that.
You can assume that when they wrote laws like this, they weren't looking at Cook County when they wrote it, so.
When you read the statute, you know, it was designed for a different kind of place. That's what I have in my head.
Yeah.
I would agree.
They weren't thinking of far end of the road rural places like this. They were thinking of other places, but, so we've gone farther than that. We have notified.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, so at the previous board, we had a SGSD come up and had a public hearing, and there was excellent participation in the public hearing. I think it's largely on the proponents of the SGSD to try to gather support and also inform residents. It's in their best interest, and it's in our best interest as well to get as much public feedback from that plan. And so I think this sounds like a good proposal. I'm just curious about if you've been able to communicate potential costs to property owners at this point.
Actually, I have. I don't know if you have that in front of you.
Not the cost, no.
No, but I mean, I came up with that, and it's just really a best rough estimate. And I'm not a roadway specialist by any means, but with a little information that Myron got from the Cook County Highway Department engineer, I think it was. And then I contacted a local contractor up there on the Arrowhead Trail to see if he would come out and kind of give me an estimate. And same type of thing, he said, we've got so much work, so that I can't really come out there on just a whim, unless, and so, but he did give me information. He said, cost of gravel, was like $400, 10 to 12 yards of gravel, and he's done other roads in the area up there. And for comparison's sake, so we have 1.7 miles of road. He said that he's doing a project where he did a half a mile of road, brought in like 12 loads of gravel, some grading, and so he said, $400 for 10 to 12 yards of gravel, grader time, he thought $180 an hour for 5 hours, use that number. If you needed ditching done, he quoted me $4 a foot, linear foot, which is a fair amount of money. And then I've had culverts replaced in the past. I kind of figured out 4 culverts at $1,500 to $2,000. Extrapolated or put that across the 1.7 miles, and my best guess numbers what I came up with, somewhere in the $35,000 to $50,000 for the initial upgrade of the road back to get it into decent shape. So divided by the 50 parcels, the TDAR thing makes it a little more down the road for people that are further in, but somewhere in the $700 to $1,000 per tax parcel that's assessed. And then following that, it's my understanding that that I volunteered to be the road representative for the group. I think it has to be an elected process, so I believe I have to get that information out to all the owners and with a ballot and say, well, I volunteer to be the representative, and then I found a person up there that would be an alternate representative if they can't get a hold of me. So then the Cook County Highway Department has one person to go to, so they go to me. They come up, look the road over, once or twice a year. I think once a year probably. We're just doing the summer maintenance and not the winter deal. And then we'd kind of figure out what really needed to be done, for the next year. But an initial thing too. And then I think that's how it goes, and then takes that back and lets it out for bids and does the specifications of the work to be done and so forth. from what I understand, and it's bid out, and then I think you guys, the board makes the proposed assessment for which is for the next year when the work's to be done. So I think nothing right now would be done until 2023 at the earliest.
Correct.
So with that process, again, once I think we have the road up to in good condition. Said maybe grading once or twice during the spring and summer months. Maybe bringing a little extra gravel. I thought this, for fixing washouts, or if we had a culvert go out or something. But somewhere more than in the $100 to $200 per taxpayer assessment, I think, for ongoing maintenance and, keep it from deteriorating again. And I think that's what we're constantly fighting Mother Nature up there. And we are at the end of the road there, actually, so.
Myron.
You have something to add?
Yeah, just to reiterate something, and I just a question. I know, did you send this letter, a copy of this letter to Brady, that you sent out?
Yeah,
to all
I've
the
got
property owners?
that.
Yeah.
And so I think some of if maybe the commissioners
Sure.
received a copy of that, it would take care of a lot of your
Yep.
questions as far as, everyone's been notified by mailing label about what's going on, the cost of the project and everything like that. So Steve has put a lot of work into that, and so that's where we're at. And I think that's where a little confusion was. We thought at one time we would have a vote by mail.
And that was something I had in there. I thought the process was that it would go to a referendum, and I found out afterwards when I spoke with Brady that is not the
Right.
process that you guys do now, so that is something I have to correct to the people that my plan is to follow up with these people that don't have email addresses for, and explain, well, it's not going to be a vote, but if you approve a public hearing, there will be a public hearing, and then it's basically just a substantial majority that guides the board in whether to approve it or not. I think
So a
I'm
question
correct
I have is in looking at establishing a date for a public hearing, we want to give you plenty of time to contact those individuals you've not been able to at this point. Do you feel that a public hearing sometime in September would be adequate?
So we're here right now, July 26th. I think, it would be fine, but perhaps that meeting at the end of August might be okay too. I'm saying that there's probably more people around up here. I wish I would have asked for their email address now in retrospect, when I sent out all this mailings and stuff. But, so I might end up having to send another mailing even to get that information, or
Right.
else look it up,
I just want to make
figure
sure
it
we
out.
give you adequate time. Myron?
Yeah, and I would just like to add that because we're really remote and people come from all over the place, and some people aren't up there very much, even throughout the year. Some are in estates, and they're not used very much. So I would hope that there would be some other options that could be considered because if half of them don't show up, what does that mean? It could mean a lot of people couldn't make it. And so I would hope that we could try to have some kind of other information to be considered, other than just how many people show up for a hearing.
Correct.
Yeah, my understanding is we can use email as public record in a public hearing, so that's not an
Right.
issue.
They could send a statement of support if.
They can
or
send
whatever.
it to the
Right.
county, and we would
To
read
the
that at the
county.
public
Yeah,
hearing.
whether it be email or a snail mail.
Thank
then,
you.
yeah,
That would be
both
helpful.
both work for
Absolutely.
public hearings. So
We do that regularly. Commissioner
Last
Sterling.
meeting in August would be the 23rd.
Right.
Would that give you time?
I think that gives me adequate time. I'm retired, so this has kind of been my pet project here for the last few
Okay.
months. But
We just want to make certain that you have plenty of time.
Yeah, I think I should be able to get something out to everybody.
And the worst case, if you have a public hearing and you needed to continue it to a
We
next
could,
meeting, you
yeah.
can do that, so.
Absolutely.
And just to mention in the policy, I didn't get it right. So right now, the administrative fee for the highway department is $1,200 initially, and then it's 15% of the annual assessment or a minimum of $600.
That's if you have both summer and winter.
Yeah, choosing winter or summer, then, yeah, choosing either one, then it's 10% of the annual assessment, a minimum of $450. So
Yeah. That's kind of what we're
you've read
looking
it, yes, okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
So I think
Commissioner
maybe
Sumner.
it'd be good, Brady or somebody to send out all these guidelines for subordinate districts, just so that we can get a handle on, I know I have the paperwork somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, if you could do that.
Oh, you'll
Brady.
have everything, yeah.
I didn't get anything this morning. I
It's
didn't get-
included.
It's included in the packet.
Oh,
It wasn't included in my packet
not-
either.
I didn't get it in my
Online.
packet.
It's
The
in-
online
If you go to
version
the
it is.
online one.
Well, that's
on
what
the
I
web-
finally
Yeah.
did, but
Oh.
it wasn't included in my board packet, and usually April sends me an update if it gets updated. So,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
that's
So
why
just-
I had not seen that letter.
No, I didn't get it either then. I was here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All
one
right.
question still for me. So I saw on there, I'm just wondering where to direct people to send their emails to or mailings.
Yeah,
Is
just
there-
Yeah, if you work with
send them
Brady. he'll-
directly to me.
Should all go right to you?
Sure.
Okay. So I saw there's a James
He likes getting
Jerky on there, on the site there. that
Right,
sends
James
statements.
is on the website. He
Oh,
also
that's you.
could read
Okay.
anything at the public comment.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Did I mispronounce your name? I'm sorry. Jerky?
Most people do, it's Yorkie.
Yorkie.
Yeah.
They get mine wrong a lot too, so. Ollie.
Yeah, I admit, we rushed to get this in just because of our 2 meetings a month and trying to get it at a time when a lot of people maybe could attend, so.
Right.
So it should come to you, Brady, then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to set a public hearing for the subordinate service district on what's being called Arrowhead Road for August 23rd at 9 a.m.
All right.
I support.
All right, so we have a motion and support. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right, we'll see you at the public hearing. All right. Now it's time to move on to Administrator Yu.
Oh, I'm all worn out. It's been a long meeting already. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Before we actually get into the numbers, I'd like to talk just a little bit about process, so that members of the public who may be watching understand kind of where this fits into the bigger picture of setting a budget and a levy. And actually, before I talk about that process, I just want to address what I think is a lingering sort of misunderstanding about how all these pieces fit together. Earlier this year, residents received their valuation notices, and most of them went up quite significantly, and that's tied into what's happening in the real estate market. Prices for land and for homes have gone up significantly, not just here in Cook County, but really across the country. And there's a misunderstanding that the county raises property valuations so that it can collect more taxes. And I understand why people have that perception, because if you don't work with this information every day, it kind of feels like, well, if my valuation goes up, my taxes have to go up. And I just want to dispel the notion that the county collects more money just because valuations go up. It does not. The county only collects more taxes when it raises the levy. And it raises the levy to cover the costs of services that the county provides to residents. And so the conversation that we're starting today is about what the level of service needs to be. We know that our population has increased. In the 2020 census, we had 5,600 people. And the population growth that we've experienced over the last 2+ years since the pandemic started has exceeded the growth rate that we've seen previously. So we do have population increasing. We are a small organization. I think we do a really great job of maximizing the use of resources that we have. At some point, when needs go up, you have to make a proportionate adjustment in the services that you provide. And so you're going to see this morning some requests for additional resources to meet needs. This is very much a preliminary proposal. And so, and the sort of rough condition of the document that you receive reflects that. And we are in the process of refining it. It's been a long process of talking with department directors to understand kind of where they see things going in their departments and to understand what the needs are going to be moving forward. And so the document that you have right now is very fluid. I expect there will be changes for members of the public to understand the timeline for this. So we actually began the budget planning process back in April and May. We are now at a point where we have preliminary requests from the departments. The board is tasked with setting a preliminary budget and levy in September. According to this year's budget calendar, that will happen on September 13th at the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. And then there's a period of a few months where we, and I should mention too, at that time, at the September 13th meeting, the board will set a preliminary budget and levy, and that levy is a not to exceed amount. The final levy gets set in December, and that levy cannot be higher than the preliminary levy, and frequently it ends up going down. So the preliminary levy is a cap, basically, that we can't exceed. And what frequently happens is in the intervening months, then we make tweaks to the budget, the amount comes down, and the final levy often ends up being less than what the preliminary levy is. So I just want to clarify that for anybody who's listening to understand kind of the timeline and the process. And so what we have today is a very rough look at what the requests are right now. And what I wanted to do today is just kind of highlight what the requests are, and also look at some of the changes in staffing levels that have been requested, so that you all have a chance to see that and ask questions about it. I should also mention we do have a budget advisory committee which meets this afternoon. It meets once a month, and it includes both members, staff members, and then also members of the public who provide community feedback on this process. So it's a very it's not a closed process at all. We do welcome input from the public. Not just members of the Budget Advisory Committee, but for folks who are listening today, if you hear things that spur questions and want to contact my office, I would certainly encourage you to do that. And so with that, I will go ahead and kind of just provide a high-level overview of some of the changes that we're seeing in the budget this year. And so right off the bat, looking at all the requests, right now what we see is a total 2023 proposed budget of $5,992,164. That compares to a budget, the approved budget in 2022, which was $5,400,384. And so as it is right now, that's an 11% increase. And much of that increase, I mentioned earlier that, we have budgeted in 10% for potential health insurance premium increases. Personnel expenses make up the biggest part of the general fund budget. And so, salaries and benefits are the primary components of that cost. We know that our staff will be receiving a 3.5% cost of living adjustment. in 2023. That's something that was negotiated in the last round of contract talks. So all three bargaining units are receiving that, as are the supervisors and department directors. And I'll say, as one member of the county's negotiating team, the other two members being Commissioners Mills and Swalson, I feel like that's a reasonable adjustment given where we are with inflation. And so we were happy to make that accommodation for staff. And want to make sure that county employees are not losing ground in the current economic climate. So the 3.5% COLA, we have budgeted 10% increase for health insurance premiums. We're hoping that it will be lower. We won't know what that figure is until probably around the end of next month. So fingers crossed for a good result there. I'm anticipating, last year we actually saw a decrease in health insurance premiums, which we certainly were not expecting. That's very uncommon. And I would expect this year we would see an increase, and I'm hoping it's 5% or less. But again, we won't really know until we get that number from the Northeast Service Co-op. So, just want to talk about some of the areas where we've had requests for additional staffing resources. The first one that I'll mention is MIS, which is our IT department. They have had in their budget for several years a half-time position that has not been filled. And we the way things are right now, we have pretty much the bare minimum staff that we need to keep our systems secure, to provide response to service requests, and to, do all the work that is needed to keep our technology secure and our equipment updated. And so there is an additional request this year from MIS. They are requesting an additional roughly $28,500 to fill out that half-time position and make it a full-time position, which would be a help desk specialist. And that would help create additional service capacity. It would also create a little bit of redundancy when we have staff going on vacations and so on, that we don't have a decrease in services. So that's one area where there has been a request for additional staffing. You all sat as the Board of Public Health and Human Services last week and heard their request for an additional supervisor position. So I'm not going to go into that today. I think that was addressed last week. In land services, there has also been a request. We've had a position, the Parks and Trails Director position, which has been vacant for at least a couple of years. And we have a lot going on right now with the Sawtooth Bluffs area, the joint powers agreement that we're planning to establish. There's probably going to be a lot of development there. And we haven't had a Parks and Trails Director for at least a couple of years. Brady, has it been since 2019? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a request for an additional half-time position that would increase $57,250 roughly to fill the Parks and Trails Director position, and also increase planning and zoning capacity. One moment, please. There's my summary. Sorry about that. So those are the two, Public Health Human Services, MIS, and Land Services are the three departments that have requested additional resources in terms of staffing. We heard from the sheriff this morning, including a new line item for technology upgrades, which again, I think is just a really wise idea, and I'm glad that we're seeing that in the budget this year. Those are kind of the key staffing increases. We do have other line item increases, which I tried to highlight in the spreadsheet that you received. Again, this proposal is very much a draft document. We are going to be making tweaks to it, and the reason I included everything in it is because I did want the board's feedback on kind of what you all feel the priorities should be. I also want to direct your attention to the summary sheet that April put up a moment ago. This is the big picture, including the general fund, highway, public health and human services. You also see the airport's funding request. We have our ongoing building fund that has basically held steady for several years. We do have the request from the Housing Redevelopment Authority, which is basically equal to what you all budgeted last year. It does include $100,000 in revenue, which is coming over from the EDA. Then we do have contingency, which again is for the for health insurance premium increases. And then we have the capital reserve fund, which is which will go to support the any capital projects that come out of the CIP update that we're doing right now. So big picture, we're proposing the use of $250,000 of reserves in the general fund. That would bring the levy request for the general fund down to roughly 6.4%. As we mentioned earlier, Highway Department would be using just shy of $450,000 of fund balance in its budget to produce a levy request of 4.75. And then Public Health and Human Services has a proposed use of $100,000 of fund balance. Its levy would be about 4.12%. The airport budget, you can see, is going up a little bit, 17% basically. And then the HRA budget, as I mentioned earlier, that's kind of staying flat as our other line items. So with the use of proposed fund balance for all three funds, we're looking at a tentative levy of just under 4.4%. So I did include in the document you received some but not all of the departmental summary sheets that highlight changes in each department's budget. I will be working to add the additional ones in before our next meeting, and will provide an updated version of this document for the next meeting.
Thank you.
So I will pause there because I feel like I've been talking a lot and see if there are any questions, which I'm sure there are.
There's lots of
You.
information.
Of course.
All right, Commissioner
No,
Hawkins.
I don't have to start, though, that's okay.
You can, absolutely.
Thank you. The budget overview thing did confuse me when it didn't quite match with the next page, the numbers. But, so thank you for that explanation of work in progress.
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to include a summary, but as recently as yesterday, Brady and I were things were not adding up, and so we wanted to make sure we had the numbers right, so.
Well, thank you. And I know that I think this is fun, but
I like to play
I'm
with
out there
spreadsheets.
playing with my spreadsheet. But it did, I think at a previous budget advisory committee, we talked about like dues and subscriptions, professional and contract services. Some departments have those, a large percentage of their budget. And our committee discussed, I would like to see over maybe $1,000 if you know, things that you have to be part of,
Mhm.
association fees.
Sure.
But the committee decided we would like to see a breakout of that for each department. If you
Mhm.
have a large amount in that, we want to know what are we contracting out for?
Mhm.
So that would be one thing that I would request
Sure.
all departments put in there.
We can certainly get that.
Some of my other questions I thought I'd bring up during our budget meeting this afternoon, just clarify. But one thing that did stick out to me, because we're right at the very top, Board of County Commissioners, and we did talk about elected officials getting the same increase as other elected officials, as far as salary goes, but I don't see any change in our numbers. Was that factored in the budget proposal?
No.
No.
It has not been,
Okay,
and it needs to be.
all right.
Madam Chair, on that note, along those lines, we absolutely do need to look at commissioner compensation. I have concerns about tying our increase to the increases that we negotiate, because that is how other elected officials get their increase, is we match whatever the unions, I mean, not always, but as a general practice, what the unions negotiate. So I'm not very comfortable with that.
Thank you, because I kind of agree, and I wondered, I'm thinking of all of the elected officials, and not just the ones as 5 of us. They don't pay union dues, they are not part, but we give them the same benefit without any discussion of their salary. They sign up, all of them did, to run for office again. We use a different standard for some elected officials than others, and I'm wondering, what's our rationale for that?
Yeah, and so other elected officials are basically department heads as well. And so we group those other elected officials into that department head group. And so the department heads, we, as I said, doesn't have to be this way, but we've as a general practice, give supervisors and department heads, what the unions had negotiated for a increase to maintain parity. What I, of course, would like to argue is that we take a average CPI and apply that to commissioners to separate from the negotiated amount. And there's 2 reasons. One, to separate it, not to have that conflict there. And then 2, to lead by example, because I think that makes so much sense for employees to get some kind of, to have that as their sites of an average CPI for COLA. And this probably will be even less popular, but that's also what I would advocate for supervisors and department heads. And that's certainly breaking from what we've done in the past. But I also know that in the past, supervisors have been asked to take either nothing or less than what was negotiated. So I think the most fair way is to really go with that data-driven amount using some kind of average CPI. And again, whether that be 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year, up for discussion. But
And Commissioner Mills, I would just note, we have had relatively flat inflation for a very long time.
yeah,
And only in the last year, really, have we seen
sure.
inflation rates not seen since the late 70s, early 80s. And so I would push back a little bit on your proposal as far as department heads and supervisors go, because everybody is feeling the pinch. And I think as a long-term strategy, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's wise. It creates predictability in budgeting. It creates predictability for taxpayers if we have something that is based on a longer-term average. My only hesitation about that just relates to the timing of how much things have changed in the last year. I think if we use that historical average, we would be giving them something that is well below what we're actually seeing in terms of inflation. So
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we could do a shorter average then.
A
one-year
3-year
average.
rather than a 10-year.
Yeah. No, I'm just making that suggestion, not drawing a line in the sand.
Well, and our conversation isn't done on this, but I think would it be important to bring forward what the actual numbers were?
Yeah.
You can't have a discussion on it without actually showing this is the average, this is what that would be.
I might disagree there because.
I think you have to do that, because if the number is less than, just as an example, less than what was proposed and what was agreed upon for your employees, then in fact you're reducing the overall margin, and over time that can be a deterrent for people even beginning to think about trying to move into a leadership position with the county. I don't know that we want to bake those in to that process, but you see my point, David. I think it's important that to have the discussion, you actually have to put real numbers out there in front of you, so you can have that open discussion on what are the, because theoretical is interesting, but people live on what those actual numbers are, that's all.
Yeah. But another facet to that is the comp study and what that'll show.
Correct.
And we're going to be doing that on the regular. So any discrepancies that, as you say, over time develop because of that would, in theory, be adjusted for with the comp study. But I do.
Your point is valid.
I
Absolutely.
recognize the risk there.
I see your point.
And the reason I was going to push back on talking about the actual numbers is because, and that's when it gets emotional. If you can take the actual and just go with the theory, that's more of a policy level thing versus looking at, well, how does this play out in favor or against? But really, it should be, how does this play out for fairness? And so that's where I'm looking at that longer term. But I
don't disagree.
Yeah.
But the reason the emotion is there, either on a positive or a negative perspective, is because that's what the real.
Yep.
That's what's in your hand and what you're going to the grocery store with.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I look forward to all the angry emails from supervisors and.
But I'm always open for those discussions. I think that's a healthy debate to have on what's fair and what's right when you're talking, and that's part of our purview of what we do. So I don't want you to think there's pushback from that. I think it also, to have the complete conversation,
Yes.
you have to start to put forward the full numbers. So I'm not saying that by any means that discussion should be done. I just think there's more discussion to be had.
Yeah.
I think that's a good discussion. One more thought that I'd like to share, and Commissioner Mills spoke to the comp study. I get people wanting to add to their departments right now. I will tell you, I'm going to be very skeptical of an increase in our levy for new positions when I think we're all kind of thinking what we are currently paying our employees is probably going to be recommended to go up with our comp study. We don't know yet, but I think that's probably a realistic assumption. And with what is happening in our economy right now, inflation and prices of everything, I have a hard time saying we are going to add more services in this time of uncertainty. Now, I get you said that my house valuation does not bring the county any more money. My taxes will be going up. I lost part of my homestead exclusion. I will be paying more taxes. I'm not the only one that's happening to. So even if we don't change anything, I will be paying more taxes. And I think we need to think about that in light of everything else that's happening and what even our Federal Reserve talking about raising interest rates again. People that are struggling to live here are struggling to live here. And yeah, I get having a Parks and Trails director full-time. Sure would be nice, but really, do we need to spend money on a Sawtooth Bluffs project right now? We need housing.
That would be a half-time position.
So.
Paired with, but, yeah.
So that's where I'm sitting today, just heads up.
And
That's where I'm coming from.
I'm thinking about those things. I'm also thinking about that we have 5,600 more people in the county based on the census. And so service needs are going to change. And so that's part of the conversation. I think we have a lot to think about in the next few months and a lot more information to gather.
Yeah.
What a good start to the conversation.
Yeah, very much so.
And Commissioner Hawkins, I mean, I totally get your point, and I feel the weight of responsibility to make sure that we use resources in the best way that we can, and that we not overburden taxpayers. I'm in full agreement on that. I also see in our organization staff dealing with being really maxed out, and it's unrealistic to think that we can just stay where we are in terms of staffing levels as the county continues to grow. So your point's really well taken, but there is also pressure on the organization that if we're not careful in how we respond to that, there's going to be diminishing returns in terms of morale and retention. So I just want to keep my eye on that ball, and I think there's a conversation we can have about what the appropriate level is.
Madam Chair, yeah, that was kind of my reaction. Is just I would say, there are rising expectations in the community for services, and rising expectations, therefore, for our staff. And yeah, I'm in a similar situation. Taxes will go up for me, period. And I expect that to always be the case, frankly. And I try to plan accordingly. When part of our jobs again is trying to look at as big a picture as we can, and this isn't a very big picture, but looking at the cost of burnout is substantial. The cost of losing somebody and hiring is substantial, and so I think for if you're looking at it at just a purely dollars and cents, that these additions are needed. And it's pretty easy to take shots at the Parks and Trails director because what is that? It's recreation, right? Or is recreation essential? Is recreation needed? I mean, some would argue no, but what we've seen in the last couple of years with the increase in visitors is frankly a lot of lack of management of our public spaces and public lands. And so really we're trying to get a more cohesive management practice in to accommodate our visitors and to make life better for our year-round residents. And a lot of the feedback I also get is around the time it takes for land services to do their jobs because of the increased demands. And so this position in particular I see as helping alleviate that, as well as getting into a more professional aspect of land management, public land management, promoting healthy living as well. So I see a lot of overlap. I don't know about the timing. I don't know, what's best right now. I think it is important to put this in there so we can talk more about it. And, certainly see the MIS side of things too, where that's need. Frankly, I see a lot. I think I've spoken to this before. I see a lot of needs in the organization, as far as more staff is concerned. I mean, clearly the sheriff's department needs more staff. They need more support too with MIS, and with all the technology that's in that department now too. Same with Recycle Center. I feel like that's a constant need for staff and help, and of course, when we're talking about public health and human services, we're all aware of those increasing needs too. So, one thing that we kind of touched on and haven't gone much further is the commissioner compensation, and I think should have done it last year probably, because this year is going to be a lot harder, and will, I'm guessing, likely get dropped because of our other needs. But we made what I would say a symbolic increase last year in the commissioner pay, and I think it's good to stay on that path. But I think there needs to be a more significant adjustment if we're to interest as many candidates as possible. Right now, it really excludes people who can't afford to run for commissioner, frankly, and that comes to personal choices, of course, and business choices and whatnot. But I can certainly speak to sacrifices in income, and part of the reason why I think I don't have someone running against me is because I cry about this enough. But it's true. It's something that I had to seriously consider before filing. Is can I keep this up? Is this sustainable? And frankly, I didn't come to a conclusion. I just filed, and because I value what I can give to the community and the voice that I can give representing people who bring concerns. So I wish we could have more resources to enable others to also serve, but this may not be the year. One idea I had for that, in terms of the comp study, is if we wrote commissioner job descriptions up, showed all the responsibilities, showed all the skills, abilities, knowledge that's necessary, and then get that scored. I thought that would be a really interesting way to evaluate pay. But as I mentioned last year, if we had applied the average rate of inflation to the commissioner's salary from when it was last updated about 20 years ago, it would be an additional $12,000 per commissioner. And so just throwing that out there as a number to keep in mind as a point of discussion. It almost feels pointless to put that into the budget because I see that as being a definite cut. But I would appreciate putting it in just for more discussion. If we don't talk about things, they don't happen. So.
Very good point.
Well, and I would just add, I mean, you all have felt the pinch of inflation as much as anyone. So, and the fact that there was no increase for 20 years and only a really token increase last year, I think speaks to a justification for including something more significant this year.
Madam Chair, also along those lines, and I frankly don't know how to navigate this, but alternatively, there could be per diems. I talked with James about that, and he cautions that it's harder to budget for per diems, and so there is maybe more risk there, but there's potential for savings as well if commissioners don't feel the need to record their expenses and their per diems, then the actual cost would be lower. But it's hard to budget for what those actual costs would be. So maybe less stable, but maybe not as expensive.
Interesting point. Other comments or questions? We have a lot of work ahead of us.
We do. And Commissioner Hawkins, I have taken a note to get you and the Budget Advisory Committee details on contractual expenses and also the subscriptions and dues and registrations. Yep.
Madam Chair. I think the only other thing I would bring forward, just even at this early stage, so that people don't think we are not understanding it. 2 items we haven't put in, we discussed or touched on the comp study. We're not proposing or trying to put something in here because it's an exploration. We're trying to gather the information and understand it. We'll have to deal with that. That's something that will come later, and we'll just deal with it. The other one, but we recognize that. The other one was the federal PILT money aspects is still an uncertainty, and it's still out there, and we know that. So, to try to put something in here when that decision is, quite frankly, not in your own hands, just doesn't serve the public or us right now.
Right.
And so there are a couple of things that are out there. We know they're out there. We'll have to manage those, when we get the final information on that.
And Commissioner, to your point about the comp study, I'm hoping, well, I'm pretty confident actually that we'll have preliminary results from that study before you all have to set the preliminary.
And I believe that as well, but to try to, just propose something when it would tell you or start to signal to people that you have an insight into where this is going to go, or it could be viewed differently, that you're trying to drive it in a certain direction, and neither one of those is true. But frankly, we're honestly trying to engage in a meaningful fashion to fully understand and make sure that we've got the equity in our pay for our employees. That's our only goal.
Correct.
Questions?
I had 2, and now,
My last statement overwhelmed you, didn't it?
I was really focusing on your words. The first one was just around the contractual amounts. Commissioner Hawkins, you had mentioned $1,000 or more. Is that the?
Well, I was picking a number.
Just picking a number.
Yeah, it doesn't.
No.
just-
Yeah, but that's what I think every single one is more than $1,000. So that's why I was kind of like, that'll be.
I'm just.
Yeah. But
I think there was
don't know
one
how-
that was $200, and I'm like, okay, that's
Sure.
probably your
Yeah.
dues for some. I guess it wasn't. There were other ones.
I remember the other
All right.
large discussion points, both with the HRA, and maybe we'll just talk about that first. We're not increasing that in this proposal, and that mainly covers the cost of the HRA's the director position. We know that there is often matching dollars needed for grants for housing. And so right now, we're not budgeting for any work to be done aside from the director's position. And I think we need to budget something for work to be done, else what's the point?
Well, and I would remind the board that we do have ARPA dollars that have been budgeted
Touché.
for infrastructure related to housing. So there is some funding to work with there.
And I would, that's very good, and I would look for the HRA, just as we do with the EDA and others, to propose things to us as far as what we should be looking for and saving for, and, otherwise, I guess from my perspective right now, I'm not really sure what I would put in there. It'd be more emotional than it would be based on, solid figures and facts.
Yep, very good
But your
point.
point is valid, absolutely.
No,
And I want people to recognize that we are serious. We do want to move forward and develop this. We've gone that direction with the tax abatements, if there's other avenues. And that's why I do look for our HRA too, and that, that committee to work with us and tell us. give us some guidance and some direction, and then we can work with it to factor it in as we need to.
Very, very well said, very good point, and yeah, so very preliminary, and it does not yet include that.
Yep.
And thank you for.
But I'm really valuing this discussion amongst everybody. I think it's important to get those things out, so we, as we're going, we feel like we've touched on all those key items and have a better understanding.
Yeah. And the other one, of course, is childcare. And we had good discussion at the PHHS board meeting. And and after that, had further discussions and really fear that $70,000 that we put a placeholder on is inadequate. And that's frustrating on a number of levels. But I don't know how best to budget that. It seemed like the best way is using fund balance. It's the safest, but I don't know that that's it's not sustainable. I guess it's maybe just a good way to get things going. But
It's a good way to get things started, just like the EDA
Yeah.
allocated $20,000 to start up some locals, daycares. This will be something PHHS uses to start. And then right now, there's an online discussion about childcare going on, and hopefully there are going to be some matching grants and things that we can benefit from.
Yeah, and that's really, I guess, what we can hope to bank on is the grants. So, but I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention, that the $70,000 is, and the reason I suggested 70,000 was because of understanding of costs per provider.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only counting 6 providers. A provider is not the organization that runs the daycare. The provider is an individual. So there's more like 14 providers.
Sure.
And so that's why the cost is inadequate, or that dollar amount. So just an explanation there. That was a misunderstanding on my part. But it's a step. Yeah, and it's a step in the right direction. So, and that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins.
I realize I forgot, I jumped a line here. On the overview sheet, it also had budgeted FTEs. And can we also maybe, semicolon, number of employees? I mean, because I saw 5.9 FTEs, and I'm thinking, I'm counting the people that I maybe know in that department. Well, is that 4 plus how many part-time? And
it's a good point. And where I worked previously, we had a fiscal budget, and then we also had an FTE budget. And those were tracked separately as a way of understanding kind of what each department had available. And it was frequently the case that, like, if there were a couple of vacant FTE positions in a budget, those would get patched together in different ways to create new positions or add a little bit of additional capacity. We don't really do it that way here. I mean, sometimes we do have additional money in personnel for a vacant half-time position, but we don't really track, like, we don't have an FTE budget. That's something that we could consider moving forward. It might be useful, but it doesn't address your question about how many people do we actually have.
well, and it made me wonder how many of, because I'm getting confused with how many hires and resignations we have. Who's where?
Right.
Yeah.
And how many does that department? Where's their open position portion of that? That's what I was curious about.
It's a great question, and who's calling us?
Hello.
Somebody wants to ask a question about the budget.
It's Bruce Kimmel.
He knows the answer.
Okay, sorry about that. So, we've seen, for example, we saw at Public Health and Human Services, the org chart for that
I like that,
department.
yeah.
And I'd like to, we don't have an up-to-date org chart for the whole organization, but we need one. And that would be a place where we could represent that information so everybody would have a clear picture of how many folks we have.
Thank you.
That'd be helpful.
Oh, Madam Chair, if I may, two more things came to mind.
We feed off each other here.
Yes, it's
We
good.
do.
It's very good. Thank you. The town halls.
I was actually going to talk about that in a minute.
Well, then I'll hold off. The other is the arts. Right now, there's nothing budgeted for that. Have you had communications, or where's?
We've had no requests this year.
Normally, there would be somebody now?
Well, I think it's because we don't solicit requests. Years ago, we did, and we made it clear that we had a process. But we haven't really had a defined process, and they've just kind of dropped off one by one, not making requests. I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, and so this reminds me of our discussion last year, and not having the process, and I don't expect that there had been progress made on a process for that, but I do have fears that we're not budgeting for a request that has a regular history of request. So I'd suggest putting that in again, if not a placeholder, then. But I think it's prudent. I think it's likely that that request will be coming in.
Well, we're going to be talking about that very thing at our Budget Advisory Committee today, so it is on our radar.
My biggest concern, and we did talk about this last year as well, is pulling the rug out from an organization that has historically gotten funding requests. And so if we haven't had regular communication about this withdrawal, then I think that could be very disruptive to a significant partner in the community.
I agree.
Yeah, I've brought my concerns up at the meeting that we can't pull the rug out from underneath organizations, and we need to create a process, an application, criteria, and announce that way ahead of time.
And limits,
Yep.
right? Yep.
Absolutely. So,
I probably have a disagreement there, but that's okay.
Well, I think it's worth discussing. I mean, I think if I'm going to guess what you would say, it's if they can afford to buy a building, then we don't need to fund them, or what?
Well, yeah, and you heard Linda Kratt tell us last week, they don't give them money for that because it doesn't help our tourism. I mean, that's not a benefit to our community, yet we do it. And why should nonprofits expect taxpayer dollars? I don't know. I would think you shouldn't depend on this board's money every single year just because you used to get it. So.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. We do need a process. My fear is just
Right.
yoinking it.
and clearly, other counties, I've done some research, do give money away
Yeah.
to nonprofits, arts organizations, historical societies, and many of them don't have a process or don't have a policy. They've just always done it that way. And I hope our organization can lead the charge in developing a process and a policy and an application that we can work with.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue one way or another that it brings in dollars to the community, but my mind is more about the values, the cultural and the arts values of the community and supporting that. And even if it's a token, it's important to make that showing. But I still feel we definitely need a process that shows need and I don't know if it's competitive but has limits as well. So.
Right.
Yep.
Thank
And
you.
I understand that there's been one or two other things going on, and so that the process hasn't been developed. But
Any other questions before we move on to my general report?
well, oh, you're talking. Okay. You're talking
I'm
about the town
anxious to
halls.
hear about the rest of your updates, so.
Okay. Well, I don't want to give short shrift to, I mean, the budget's kind of
I don't
important.
think anyone can claim that at this point.
The only, you said you're going to be talking about the town halls, and that's in your
I was just
Yeah.
going to mention that in the context of the CIP update. So we are working with Chad Rickel at CRBPS. They have all the plans that we were able to find to create the 3D models that we're going to be using for the building walkthroughs. We are looking at scheduling a site visit within the next couple of weeks. It's taken them a little bit longer to create those models than we anticipated. Again, I want to recognize April for all the work she did in finding those plans, because it wasn't like going to a file drawer and there they were. It was like, call Brian, call the community center, call the law enforcement center.
the drawer and see plans that you didn't know existed.
Right. I mean, it was somewhat of a lack of organization. So anyway, but we're working on that. In any case, so they have all the information that we were able to provide. They're creating 3D models. We're hoping to schedule a site visit here. I told Chad I'd like it like no later than the middle of August. So that'll be happening quick. We have had a request from the Budget Advisory Committee. They'd like to be apprised when those visits are occurring, which I think is great. Commissioner Mills, you asked about the town halls. I did just recently, Friday and Saturday last week, go to Colville and Hoveland town halls to kind of check them out and talk with the folks who are basically the stewards of those facilities. For folks who are listening, they're county-owned properties, but they're basically operated by local residents who, just keep an eye on the buildings, take care of basic upkeep. There are some needs in those buildings, for sure. The back of the Hoveland Town Hall, for example, it's the Colville Town Hall, has some fairly significant wood rot going on. The back of the Hoveland Town Hall hasn't been painted. The west, south, and east sides have been painted. The back has not been. And also
We painted the area that people see, so.
Right, which, yeah. Also discovered some pretty scary wiring issues in the basement of that building when.
Don't go
when
into
I
the
walked through.
Oh,
So,
I was just there.
yeah, so we, as soon as I saw that, I got in touch with Brian Silence, and we've had somebody go out there and do some work on that. But those are, those are buildings that we own. They are community assets. I think where you were going with your question, Commissioner, is, we budgeted $3,900 for those two facilities. And the actual needs there are quite in excess of that amount. So we're going to have that conversation as part of the CIP update is, what do we do about those buildings? They do provide community benefits. They are an expense in the ledger, and I think as we start prioritizing what our needs are organization-wide across all of our buildings, we're going to have a conversation about where those fit into the big picture.
Yep.
So,
Madam Chair, if I may, my specific question was about the call out of the town halls from the rest of our facilities in the budget, and it is interesting that the 3,900 has been what we've been budgeting, and then in 2021 only 1,600 was spent there. So that's interesting, but.
Well, and you're seeing the results of that
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
level of expenditure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 3,900 was mostly just for, the heating aspects of it,
Sure.
and that type of thing. There are fees that get charged and stuff to help to offset a lot of that. So you're right. It doesn't, but yeah, what we budget doesn't meet the
doesn't
general
cover.
maintenance, as it wouldn't, for the rest. But
Right.
you're correct, and that was been my conversation in discussions with folks in those communities it needs to be a part of the overall review of our facilities and then prioritized in that. And so the use of the facilities is very important, and, Some of them get used, they both get used periodically, you know, and I know that both of the folks that are dealing with those are actively working to get people to utilize them more, so.
It'd be nice if we could track that through the county, that there was an application process for use that we had on our website.
So the way it works currently is that, you know, community members who want to use those facilities, they pretty much have to know who to call.
That's right.
They don't, I mean, you can't go to the county's website and
Right.
like reserve the Colville Town Hall. And so I think we can improve the process of making the public aware of how to book those facilities if they want to do that. There's also the question of the financial overview, because, you know, the groups that are managing it now do charge rent for the facilities, and each building has a bank account that is used to pay for basic supplies for the building and very minor maintenance issues, but it falls far short of like addressing capital needs. But currently, there's not a process for reporting that information to the county, and there needs to be, because they're public buildings.
Correct.
We should have that information, but that's not been the way that we've done it in the past, and so that's something that we will be addressing.
But I applaud your, you know, visits to the buildings, getting a firsthand observation of it, and, you know, that will help the overall where it gets placed, but still, you gotta look at the overall needs of, you know, and prioritization. I think they'll struggle to meet, you know.
It's possible. So that's where we are in the CIP update. And then the other big thing I wanted to mention is just that we are at a point where we're kind of at a stopping point of the first phase of the comp study, where we've had a lot of discussions about the factors that we're going to be using to select comparable counties. There is an all-staff meeting scheduled for August 1st, where we're going to update staff on the work to date. And that was part of what we committed to when we started this process. It's just making sure that as we went through it, staff had information coming to them so they could ask questions, make suggestions, et cetera. And we did that by including representation from our 3 bargaining units on the working group. And so they've been feeding information back to their membership, and now we're going to have this all-staff meeting to kind of talk about the process and have an open forum for questions before we move on to presenting to you all at your next business meeting where we are and what we're recommending as the factors to use for selecting comps. And want you guys to have a chance to weigh in and ask questions about that before we take the next step. So that's how that process is going. Again, I'm just really, really happy with all the participation that we've had from all the members of the working group, including your own Commissioner Dave Mills, who's asked a lot of great questions and provided a lot of really useful input. So
I talked a lot.
He's got good ideas.
We
And
know,
it's-
we
yeah.
know.
So those are kind of the 2 big things that are going on. There are smaller things that probably don't merit a lot of discussion here. But yeah, that's it. So happy to address any questions you might have.
Any questions? Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I think it's probably just a good idea just to say this at a board meeting, that I'm not going to be available to be at the presentation for the all-staff meeting, and Mr. Yorkie requested that we don't have it be a public meeting.
Right.
Correct.
And so we were limiting the commissioners. And I recognize that I was the only commissioner involved in the process, so I don't know if it'd be appropriate to have an alternate there in my stead. Commissioner Swalson, I know you have experience with this and could speak to it, but not about our process, so I didn't know if that made any sense. Otherwise, I was going to just do a video recording, like a Zoom.
I'll be out of the area on August 1st anyway. But
Okay, there we are.
I agreed.
I think the idea of the video recording.
Okay.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll lean on that. then.
I
Thank
certainly
you.
don't.
Thank you for.
I certainly don't think the group will suffer for us not being there.
Well, and yeah, yeah.
They can speak freely.
Indeed, they can.
I also, Madam Chair, if I may, had a question about strategic planning. And don't know if that's, I mean, you've
Yeah,
got plenty
so-
going on, but you just don't want to.
And I don't recall, I think I may have already updated you that we were planning to work with Roger Reiner,
Mhm.
who, since we last talked to him, has received a promotion. He's an active member of the Navy. And so he no longer has the time to assist in the development of our plan. I thought I shared that with you.
You did.
Perhaps I didn't.
I didn't lodge that in my head. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for.
Didn't
the
make
update.
it to this end of the
In
table.
in any case, so in the interim, I have talked, we met recently, we had the folks from the Extension Program up here. They also provide assistance with strategic planning. And so I had asked if they could provide some contacts. I've not heard back from them yet, but I'll follow up with them today. But that's still very much on my radar.
Great. Yep. I assume so, but just hadn't heard anything.
Yep.
So thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, if not, we'll move on to employee concerns, commissioner updates, any reports or meetings, information? Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Well, I'm into cardboard and childcare. And I didn't want to get out of my lane with Commissioner Mills talking about childcare. Because at the ARDC commission meeting, which means there's representatives from cities and townships, and it's a broader thing than just the board. Andy Hubley brought up the fact that they're looking at their budget to look into helping with childcare across the region, of course. So before our meeting, that we're going to discuss it here, I will give him a little bit of time to kind of put together something and maybe have info when we have our meeting on childcare.
Right.
Second of all, this is just an interesting situation, what happens when land is exchanged. So at the bottom of the Ski Hill Road, there's a parking lot. And that's eventually going to be for the Gitchigami trailhead. That land was sold to the DNR. In the process, somewhere along the line, Tim was told to get the 18-wheeler cardboard trailers off of it. So there were 2 trailers that took cardboard on. Well, that did not go over very well. So then I found out about that, and in the process, I contacted Oliver Liu, who represents the DNR, the Gitche Trail and all that. As of yesterday, they're back, because we're not going to develop that for at least 2 years. So why can't we have our cardboard trailers there for the folks who have businesses and just regular people who have tons of cardboard to go to Tofty's, fine, and the 2 trailers will stay there, but we'll also have the 2 back in Lutzen. There we go. Coordination and cooperation.
Very good. Thank you for your
Common
help with that.
sense.
Yeah, it is.
Common sense. All right, thank you. Other commissioners? All right, well, if not, we have our PHHS special meeting of the board on August 10th at 1 p.m. here in the Commissioners' Room to discuss the scope and budget for childcare. So that will tie in with the information Commissioner Storley is getting for us. We have our sales tax report for correspondence, and then we would like to recognize our new hires. It's always something to celebrate. And we have Andrew Dahlstrom at the Recycling Center as an assistant, and Andrea Cuthbert, eligibility specialist. And so we are excited and welcome them to our team. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Mills. Is there support?
I'll support.
Thank you, Commissioner Svalison. A motion and support. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much for a great meeting.